大家好，欢迎来到我们的六度探索节目。今天我们来探讨一个令人振奋的话题，与习近平唱反调。据报道，大陆总理李强在瑞士达沃斯经济论坛上发表讲话，指出中国经济经历新冠疫情冲击后，就像大病初愈，应该固本培元，不能下猛药。然而，大陆官方媒体在报道中删除了"不能下猛药"这句话，只保留了固本培元。有评论认为，这是因为李强的说法与习近平的经济政策相违背，才遭到全面删除。这种情况让人联想到已故总理李克强的遭遇，他曾说过中国有6亿人年收入不足1000元，这句话也被全网删除。这背后的原因究竟是什么？请大家继续收看详细内容。欢迎收看华尔街争议，我是你的主持人。今天我们要探讨一个令人关注的新闻事件，关于中国领导人在不同场合发表的经济言论及其背后的政治意味。首先，这篇文章来源于中广新闻网，讨论的是中国大陆总理李强在瑞士夏季达沃斯经济论坛上的发言。李强在会上表示，中国经济经过新冠疫情几年的冲击后，就像一个人刚刚大病初愈，根据中医理论，这个时候应当固本培元，不能下猛药。然而，当大陆的官方媒体发布他的演讲稿时，这句话被删掉了，只留下了固本培元这个说法。这一删改引发了广泛的关注和讨论，一些评论认为，这可能是因为李强的言论与国家主席习近平的看法不一致。李强在致辞中提到，当前世界经济正面临增长困境和瓶颈期。接着，他提到中国经济在经过新冠疫情几年的冲击后，像是一个刚刚大病初愈的人，需要固本培元，而不是采取激进的经济措施。然而，这个观点在大陆媒体的报道中被删除了，只留下了固本培元这4个字。评论认为，李强现在的处境与已故的前总理李克强相似。李克强曾表示中国有6亿人口，年收入不足1000元，这句话后来也遭到了全网删除。分析指出，这可能是因为习近平最近推出了一系列激进的经济措施，而李强的言论与其相悖，所以遭到删减。现在，我们从不同角度深入分析这篇报道以及其背后的背景和影响。从政治角度来看，这一事件反映了中国高层内部的意见分歧。习近平作为国家主席，近年来采取了一系列激进的经济改革措施，意在提振经济增长。然而，李强的言论似乎与习近平的策略相悖，主张稳妥渐进的经济恢复方式。这种高层意见不一致，可能会对政策执行和经济预期产生影响，甚至会导致市场的不确定性增加。从经济角度来看，李强的言论具有一定的合理性。中国经济在经历了长时间的疫情冲击后，确实需要时间恢复元气。激进的经济刺激措施可能会在短期内带来增长，但也可能带来长期的隐患，例如债务风险增加、资产泡沫形成等。因此，李强的固本培元理念主张通过加强基础经济建设和提升经济内生动力来实现可持续发展。这种观点在经济学上具有一定的可行性和合理性。从媒体和公众舆论角度来看，李强的言论被删除，这一现象引发了广泛关注和讨论。媒体作为信息传播的主要渠道，其报道内容和方式往往会影响公众的认知和态度。官方媒体对李强言论的删减，引发了外界对信息透明度和言论自由的担忧。这种做法可能会削弱公众对政府信息的信任度，并激发更多的猜测和不安。从历史角度来看，这种删减言论的做法并不新鲜。前总理李克强的言论被删除就是一个典型例子。这种做法可能是为了维护某种政治正确性，避免高层意见分歧公开化。然而，这也反映了中国政治体制中的某些特点，即信息控制和言论统一在一定程度上是为了维护政治稳定和政策一致性。从国际角度来看，中国作为全球第2大经济体，其经济政策和领导人言论备受全球关注。李强在国际场合的发言被删减，引发了国际社会对中国经济政策透明度和政策执行一致性的质疑。这可能会影响国际投资者对中国市场的信心，并对中国的国际形象产生影响。总的来说，李强在达沃斯论坛上的发言及其删减，反映了中国高层内部在经济政策上的意见分歧。 这种现象不仅具有重要的政治和经济影响，还引发了广泛的媒体和公众关注。无论是从内部政治角力、经济政策执行，还是从信息透明度和国际影响来看，这一事件都值得我们深入探讨和分析。接下来，我们继续深入讨论这一事件的具体影响及潜在的后续发展。首先，李强的言论被删减，这对中国国内经济政策的执行和市场预期会产生什么样的影响？高层意见分歧可能使得政策执行变得更加复杂和困难，市场参与者可能会对政策的稳定性产生疑虑，进而影响市场信心和投资决策。特别是在当前全球经济不确定性增加的大背景下，政策的一致性和透明度显得尤为重要。其次，从社会层面来看，李强的言论被删减，这一现象如何影响公众对政府的信任和对经济前景的预期？信息透明度和言论自由是现代社会的重要元素，对政府信息的不信任可能会导致公众信心的降低，进而影响消费和投资行为。特别是对于中小企业和普通民众来说，他们可能更加依赖于政府政策的稳定和透明。因此，这一事件可能会在一定程度上影响社会的整体经济活动。此外，从国际关系和全球经济的角度来看，中国作为全球经济的重要一环，其政策透明度和一致性备受国际关注。李强的言论被删减，这一现象可能会引发国际社会对中国经济政策稳定性的质疑，进而影响跨国投资和国际贸易关系。特别是对于那些与中国有紧密经济联系的国家和企业来说，他们可能会重新评估与中国的合作策略。最后，从长远发展的角度来看，这一事件是否会引发中国高层对信息透明度和政策沟通机制的反思和调整？信息透明度和政策沟通机制的完善，不仅有助于提高政府的公信力，还能增强市场和公众对政策的理解和信任。高层意见分歧的公开化，虽然在短期内可能带来一定的争议和不确定性，但从长远来看，有助于形成更加透明和开放的政策环境。总之，李强在达沃斯论坛上的言论及其被删减，揭示了中国高层在经济政策上的意见分歧和信息透明度问题。这一事件不仅对中国国内的经济政策执行和市场预期产生影响，还引发了广泛的媒体和公众关注，甚至可能影响国际社会对中国经济政策的看法。未来，如何在保持政策一致性的同时，增强信息透明度和政策沟通，将是中国高层需要面对的重要课题。感谢收看今天的华尔街争议，我们将在未来继续关注这一事件的发展及其对中国和全球经济的影响。请继续关注我们的节目，我们将为您带来更多深度分析和最新动态。谢谢，再见。在一个风和日丽的早晨，中国的长安街上车水马龙，生活一如既往地进行着。然而，此刻的中国经济却如同一位大病初愈的病人，等待着一个高明的医生给予正确的治疗。话说回来，这个医生就是中国国家总理李强，他在最近的世界经济论坛上掀起了一场不小的风波。李强在论坛上对中国经济的描述，简直就像一位老中医在给病人把脉。他使用了固本培元这个中医术语来形容中国经济的现状。李强解释道，经过疫情几年的冲击，经济就像一个人大病初愈，按照中医理论，这个时候是不能下猛药的，应该精准调理，慢慢调理，使它的基础逐步恢复。听上去似乎很有道理，但网络上的反应却大相径庭。自由亚洲的报道指出，李强的这番讲话似乎戳到了中国国家主席习近平的痛处。李强的不能下猛药言论瞬间在网上消失得无影无踪，仿佛从未存在过。网友们纷纷调侃，李强享有了和前总理李克强一样的待遇，被404。李克强曾表示中国有6亿人口年收入不足1000元，结果也是全网屏蔽。这不禁让人想起了李克强，他可是长短结合、标本兼治这个词的忠实粉丝。10年前，李克强在多个小领域中频繁使用这个词组，他成了他的标签之一。然而，这次李强把这个词组搬到了宏观经济领域，试图给市场注入一丝信心，结果却弄巧成拙，市场一片哀嚎，情绪波动可以理解，但事实却是，这个词组早已成为经济固定表述，不提反而显得奇怪。 在论坛上，李强还不忘吹嘘一番中国经济的持续推动高品质发展，并指责西方的经济措施是开历史倒车、搞脱钩断链、小院高墙等等。李强的这番话引起了新加坡联合早报的注意，他们详细记录了李强的演讲内容。可见，李强不仅在国内被404，连国际媒体也难以忽视他那不愿下猛药的中医论。然而，这场中医论并未平息中国网友的疑虑，网友们纷纷嘲笑现任总理李强和前任总理李克强的命运相似，仿佛上了一场名为总理言论被删的戏码。更有甚者，认为李强无奈地将中国经济的困境归咎于世界经济的成长瓶颈期，但未能提供有效的解决方案。在接受自由亚洲采访时，中国知名金融学者贺江兵更是一针见血地指出，李强的固本培元言论对市场打击巨大。他形容这一切都是纸上雕花，花再雕得好，也无济于事。贺江兵认为，中共几十年的经济发展已经毁于一旦，经济改革的根源已经断掉，所谓的固本无非是空谈。贺江兵的观点并非毫无道理。他指出，中共过去几十年对外依赖欧美的经贸关系，对内推行市场化改革，这才是中国经济得以发展的根本。但如今，欧美对中国的态度发生了变化，许多西方国家对中国采取了经济制裁和脱钩政策，内部的市场化改革也遭遇了瓶颈，种种因素叠加，使得中国经济难以再现辉煌。面对这一切，中国的经济形势如同悬在半空的钢索，任何一个错误的决策都可能导致经济断崖式下跌。然而，习近平似乎并未意识到这一点，他到处提油救火，试图通过严查国企改制过程中的国有资产流失问题来挽救局面。然而，这种做法无异于饮鸩止渴，民企纷纷倒下，经济复苏的希望愈发渺茫。在这种背景下，李强的固本培元言论无疑是一次高风险的尝试。他试图通过中医理论来安抚市场，然而市场并非如此容易被安抚，投资者的信心已经受到了严重打击，股票市场的波动更是显而易见。李强的这番话或许只是给市场添加了一剂苦涩的药汤，而非真正的良药。事实上，中国经济的困境并非一朝一夕可以解决的。李强的固本培元理念或许有其道理，但在当下的经济环境中，这种缓慢调理的方式显然无法满足市场的迫切需求。市场需要的是立竿见影的刺激措施，而非长时间的调理。中国大陆一家为用户和企业海外投资提供资讯的专业平台格隆汇，在刊发李强不能下猛药的内容后不久，文章也遭删除。这一切似乎预示着李强的中医论并未得到主流媒体的认可，反而招致了更多的质疑。综上所述，李强的固本培元言论在中国经济论坛上掀起了不小的波澜，他试图通过中医理论来解释中国经济的现状，然而这番话却引发了巨大的争议。市场情绪波动，投资者信心受挫，股票市场波动不定。这一切都表明，李强的中医论或许难以在短期内为中国经济带来实质性的改善。面对这样的局面，中国需要的不仅仅是固本培元的中医理念，更需要实实在在的经济改革和有效的政策措施，否则中国经济的未来依然不容乐观。李强和他的中医论或许只能在历史的长河中成为一段下猛药的有趣插曲。欢迎大家进入六度探索的辩论环节，我们从正反两个角度对本节目进行辩论，请出我们的辩论高手楚天舒、谢琪琪。
我是楚天舒，
我是谢琪琪。
各位朋友，李强总理的比喻真是中肯的很啊。他说中国经济大病初愈，需要固本培元，不能下猛药，这简直就是未雨绸缪。你看，中医讲究治未病，这是千年智慧。就像《黄帝内经》所说的，夫治未病者，见肝之病，知肝传脾，当先食脾，而不是一味猛药伤身。难道我们不该对经济也如此小心调理吗？
楚天舒，你这是在唱中国版的妈妈说我不能吃糖吗？你讲中医，我讲西医，急性并不及时用猛药，等着病情加重吗？李强的固本培元固然好听，但面对经济下滑的现实，难道不用猛药来刺激经济？再说了， 历史上多少次经济危机都是靠猛药度过的。罗斯福新政、凯恩斯主义，不都是急需猛药的时候用的？
琪琪，你这论调倒像是《水浒传》里的武松，逮着猛虎就一顿猛打。但你别忘了，经济可不是猛虎。中国经济具有自己的特色，不能照搬西方的模式。你提到罗斯福新政，没错，当时美国的确用了猛药，但别忘了，那是特定情况。而中国现在面临的问题，不仅仅是经济，还有社会结构和国际形势的复杂性。猛药可能会带来更多的副作用，正如《红楼梦》里贾母说的药不能乱吃。
楚天舒，倒是你这番不能乱吃药的说法，有点像《西游记》里的唐僧，处处小心，结果被妖怪抓了去。你说中国经济不能照搬西方模式，但不刺激经济，难道要坐等经济继续下滑？再说了，李强这句话被删，是不是因为他和习近平意见相左？这可是政治角力，不是单纯的经济问题。再者，如果李强的话真的有道理，为什么要全网404？是不是有点此地无银300两的嫌疑？
琪琪，你这倒像是《聊斋志异》里的狐仙，专挑敏感话题。我不得不说，删掉不能下猛药，更多是为了避免市场恐慌。你也知道，市场情绪是非常脆弱的，过分解读一句话可能引发蝴蝶效应。再者，删掉不代表不认同，而是为了更好的引导舆论，避免不必要的恐慌和误解。要知道，固本培元本身也是一个十分积极的信号，代表了中国经济的长远规划。
楚天舒，你这论调像极了《三国演义》里的诸葛亮，尽是些谋略。难道市场情绪脆弱就要掩耳盗铃？删除不能下猛药的说法，其实只会让人觉得政府在隐瞒什么。你的固本培元听起来安慰人心，但经济发展需要实实在在的措施，而不是口号。若不应对当前的危机，未来只会更加困难。与其在乎这些词语，不如实实在在的解决问题。
谢谢大家收看六度探索，这是一个由科学家、经济学家、媒体人、工程技术人员合作建立的新型媒体，网友与六度 AI 参与合作完成各种内容，这些内容不能作为任何决策或法律的意见。这是一个新型的试验性媒体方式，我们希望得到大家的支持，修正错误。网友可以参与讨论，也可以向万能的六博士提出你能想出的任何问题。六度世界网址是6do world， 请介绍给你的亲朋好友。
想成为全球沟通达人吗？6do 人工智能语音克隆技术帮你实现梦想。在这个新时代，语言障碍已成过去，我们隆重推出6do人工智能语音克隆系统。这项由欧美亚顶尖专家研发的突破性技术，让你可以克隆自己的声音，并将文字转换成145种语言和方言，提升你的个人和职业生活。想象一下，你可以在日本参加商务会议，在巴西上课，或与意大利的朋友畅聊，而这一切都用你自己的声音、他们的语言进行。操作简单，只需点击几下，无需复杂的科技知识，就能享受无缝衔接的体验，让世界向你敞开。从商务到教育，从媒体到娱乐，应用场景无处不在。企业可以更好地与全球客户建立联系。教育机构可以提供多语言学习，媒体可以创作更丰富的内容，触达更广泛的受众。今天就来体验这项革命性技术吧！访问，迈向你的声音无国界的未来。想成为全球沟通达人吗？6do人工智能语音克隆技术帮你实现梦想。在这个新时代，语言障碍已成过去，我们隆重推出6do人工智能语音克隆系统。这项由欧美亚顶尖专家研发的突破性技术， 让你可以克隆自己的声音，并将文字转换成145种语言和方言，提升你的个人和职业生活。想象一下，你可以在日本参加商务会议，在巴西上课，或与意大利的朋友畅聊，而这一切都用你自己的声音、他们的语言进行。操作简单，只需点击几下，无需复杂的科技知识，就能享受无缝衔接的体验，让世界向你敞开。从商务到教育，从媒体到娱乐，应用场景无处不在。企业可以更好地与全球客户建立联系，教育机构可以提供多语言学习，媒体可以创作更丰富的内容，触达更广泛的受众。今天就来体验这项革命性技术吧！访问，迈向你的声音无国界的未来。
观众朋友们好，欢迎大家来到今天的华尔街论坛节目现场。近期有关于中国的政治，大家特别关注到的是政治局的会议以及即将召开的三中全会。但是在刚刚过去的这一天，有关于中国地方大员的调整轮换消息引起了我们的关注到底这一次是哪几位的职位出现了变化，又为什么在这个时机上做出这样重大的人事调整？我们是不是先请小杨来介绍一下，到底是哪一些人有新职了？
最近这个中国的人事调整不仅局限于这个军队其实在这个各个地方的大员的调整也是频繁的在进行。那我们看到的是包括吉林、包括安徽、包括宁夏这些地方的一把手出现了调整。那么四川省的这个黄强是出任吉林的省委书记，而梁延顺则接替韩俊出任了安徽省委书记，以及李毅飞接替梁延顺出任宁夏的党委书记。那么这其中就包括了5个人的这样的5个官员的调动。那么包括黄强、梁延顺李毅飞、这个景俊海以及韩俊他们都是中共20届中央委员，这是他们的共同点。而黄强呢可能可以被归类为航天帮因为黄强他本人是长期在航天科技领域工作。那自2014年起在甘肃河南四川、吉林4省份担任地方职务，现年61岁，是浙江金华东阳人，也曾主导中国的一架这个军用的战斗机飞豹飞机的数字信息传输系统。而具体到梁延顺呢，梁延顺现年也是61岁，是山东的泰安人，毕业于山东农业大学，曾在中央党校和中宣部任职，担任过甘肃省委书记、组织部长以及宁夏的党委书记。而到李毅飞这里这个李毅飞长期在西部省份任职，现年60岁，是云南的普洱墨江人曾在云南、贵州、新疆等地任职，现任新疆党委副书记、新疆生产建设兵团的党委书记。那么其实这一连串的调动发生的这个事件是在6月28日吉林、安徽、宁夏是分别召开了领导干部会议是由中央组织部副部长宣布了上述的这个中央的决定。那么我们简单说一说，这个黄强是有航天科技的背景，而梁延顺则是在学术和党校教育方面有丰富的经验，李毅飞呢则是在民族地区工作的经验呢比较的丰富。有人认为这样的一个调整显示出了中央，也就是习近平对地方高官的严格管理以及反腐的力度持续抓紧不放也是要确保地方领导班子的清廉和高效。那对于这样的一个不同背景的高官的一个人事调整不知道何明先生怎么看？
我最近这个老门一拍提出了一个新的观念，就是中国没有地方哪里有什么地方哪里有什么地方领导人呢？地方领导人都是中央决定的，这不奇怪。奇怪的是如此频繁的调动，让这些省委书记、省长人怎么干活怎么做一个规划但是呢，如果你不这样去调整， 这些省长、这些省委书记就在地方的利益集团固化了啊。那么这就是一个呢两难的问题。80年代、90年代啊，一个省委书记和省长啊，权力啊分不清楚，就打得头破血流。打得头破血流的结果就是呢，哎，你省长老老实实干，好好干，配合一把手，然后呢，有你的机会呢，啊，当一个书记，像现在的黄强，对吧？现在跟这个省委书记配合还不错啊，那就赏你一个呢，啊，吉林省委书记啊。当然了，吉林啊、辽宁、黑龙江啊，是大家未来要关注的重点。那么他的这个人事调整已经慢慢从原来那种，哎，就给你一个职务，到一种呢，可能真正有一些能力的人来执政这个东北3省。那黄江是不是有能力啊？我们大家可以看，因为景镇海呢，这个人呢是真啊，陕西出来的啊，他最大的功劳啊，就是拍了习近平的马屁，建了一个习老爷子的灵堂啊，不是叫灵堂啊，是叫什么啊？陵园啊，陵园。那么这个事情对于习家来讲，那当然是他们的一个家族的一个荣光，对吧？或者是一个他们对习正孙的一等追悼啊，这个你可能很难追究。但是问题是啊，对于陕西来讲啊，拍习近平这个马屁，成为习近平这个习正孙这个事情呢，就成为有些人非议习近平的一个原因。那么陕西的腐败的情况有多大程度上涉及到景镇海，我不知道。景镇海另有安排，是安排什么？是到中宣部啊，或者是什么统战部或者政协，还是到人大？现在我们都不知道啊。另有任用，如果是到人大或者政协的话呢，那基本上就意味着呢，他的一些问题，要么就被追查过程中间，要么呢啊，就让他呢这个换一个地方啊，看是不是软着陆算了。啊，如果他升级到了官，那就是另一码事情了。那黄强啊，前面讲了，从四川省省长啊挪到这个吉林省委书记，给他当然是升了一级，对吧？但是呢，同时呢又给了四川省省长腾出了一个位置，谁？当然是施小玲的可能性比较大。施小玲就是一个未来继续上升的一个政治明星，因为她是女性啊，然后呢跟丁水强也非常的熟啊，所以如果没有弄错的话呢，那就是施小玲呢很有可能是四川省长，四川省省长，四川省省长那基本上是一个大省，那就为了当下一届的这个什么省委书记未来的女性的一个接班人之一那施小玲这种可能性是存在的。那么再回头来讲这个安徽的这个韩正呢调过去了，大家很简单，就是接这个农业部长唐仁健吧农业部长安徽是个农业省，所以梁一顺这样一个好像是农业相关的人呢，那担任这个职务基本上就是这么一个特点我们要注意到这个农业省份一个是吉林一个呢就是安徽这个职务呢，要么当农业部长，要么就是当负责农业的这个副省长，像现在的刘国中嘛，对吧？就是在吉林出来的。还有一个什么，李毅飞就没什么好谈的了。这个宁夏是一个不重要的一个地方，对吧？然后是一个比吉的地方也小很多，所以宁夏呢，梁宁顺好像是在宁夏升上来的嘛，是宁夏区委书记升到这个安徽是一个大省所以这样李毅飞就是一个现在还不知道也许是个过渡，也许是一个到头的一个职务其他还有什么就是差不多吧那么这个下一步就是这个星期好像是在开全国人大常委会，如果这个星期是在开全国人大会了，那么农业部长其他的几个什么部委可能就有新的任命，景镇海韩正的职务就会应该就得到落实。
好，谢谢这个和平先生的点评那么有关于这个人事变动的调整，那么我们今天暂时说到这里。接下来为大家继续追踪的是之前的一起引发广泛关注的社会事件，就是苏州的这个日本学校校车的袭击事件。那么我们今天也特别看到苏州公安局是正式发出了通告，就是在这一起校车袭击案中可以说不顾自己的安危，阻拦这一位犯罪嫌疑人的这一位女士叫做胡友平那么因为伤重不幸的去世。那么苏州方面呢是宣布追授她见义勇为这样的一个称号。 而更让人觉得非常的让人觉得敬畏的就是这个日本的驻华使馆特别呢为这一位女士呢降了半旗，而同时呢，日本的这个大使也特别发了这样的一段声明，说相信这一位女子的勇气和善良是代表了广大的中国民众。整个事件还有哪一些疑问，还有哪一些后续进展值得我们关注？我们是不是请小杨来简单总结一下
先来回顾一下到底发生了什么是在6月24日，在这个江苏苏州市那么根据苏州市公安局的通报说那么在6月24日下午那载着放学回家的一个孩子抵达这个公交车站的一辆这个日本人学校的校车，那遭到了一名中国男子的持刀袭击，一对日本母子和一名在公交车站工作的中国女子受伤。那么根据苏州市公安局的说法，这个行凶者是52岁的一个姓周的男子，是近期从苏州外地来到苏州的一个无业人员，已经被刑事拘留了。那苏州官方在6月27日发通告说那在上述袭击事件中阻拦行凶者的中国女子经抢救无效不幸离世，拟被追授苏州市见义勇为模范。那该女子胡友平是生于1969年7月生，现居苏州市的姑苏区。那这个刚才李琦也提到了，这个日本驻华使馆特意在官方微博账号上发文说今闻胡友平经抢救无效不幸离世，使馆深感痛惜。那胡友平以一己之力从歹徒手中保护了无辜的妇幼，相信他的勇气与善良也代表了广大的中国民众。那使馆在此向他大义之举致敬，愿他安息。那么另外根据这个中国其他媒体的报道，其实这个胡友平的去世的消息传出之后苏州高新区塔园路附近的花店店主就说，那在6月28日周五一早就有不少人打电话订菊花，要求送到这个塔园路新地中心公交站台。那么有报道也说这个很多市民到了公交站台献花，那在工作人员的引导下，把花拿到了附近停车场的一辆商务车上。那说这些送来的花呢，会统一收集送到殡仪馆。但是在这里插一句话，其实对于这个胡友平能不能被追授为见义勇为？那这个我在上节目之前特地去查了一下中国在规范政策中对于见义勇为这样一个行为的定义。在中国见义勇为是主体是非负有法定职责或者义务的自然人，那负有法定职责或者义务的主体，在履行法定职责或义务时呢，不能成为见义勇为的主体。所以说可能我觉得胡友平在这里不能成为被定义为一个这个见义勇为的主体，因为当时这个胡友平女士是校车这个整个校车接送环节的一个乘务员，那是如果是有合同可以证明的话，她是受雇于学校的，那保护小孩呢是她的职责我觉得呢是不适用于见义勇为可能把它定义为烈士呢更加的合适。这个呢完全是从个人理解这个已经存在的这个见义勇为的定义上来进行解释的。当然了，如果是说你被定义为烈士更好，还是被定义为这个不同级别的见义勇为的这个个体也好，那哪个对于胡友平以及他的这个家人更为合适那这个屏幕前的观众可能也有各自的看法。那不知道和平先生怎么看对于这一位非常勇敢的中国女士，她在去世之后呢，关于她的这样的一个讨论。
不过怎么样这个事情就是这样，大家感觉到就是痛心中国现在的这个社会问题这么多那么会不会继续演化成各种各样的暴力事件像美国这样天天发生这样多的冲突这么多的枪击案这样的一个事情呢，确实是的非常值得担忧。因为中国老是在吹嘘着自己社会治安好，你们美国治安不好，确实的这也是一个问题。美国的治安不好，大家也很清楚，但是中国的治安好结果连续出几件事情，而且是针对的这个危机人士，对中国的国际形象也好，尤其是反映出来这些暴力分子，他们是受了政府的鼓动，还是受了这个民间的暴力的鼓动，还是纯粹是两件案子都是的单一的这个案子那么中国政府呢还不是说 给他一个烈士啊，这个勇敢的这个胡女士烈士还是见义勇为，这个东西都是比较政治性的东西。但是这个日本在官方方面表达的是很得体，而且呢，就是说给予了他足够的这个荣耀，因为下半旗不是开玩笑的，对吧？所以这个还是很多事情的这个讨论嘛。我最关心的一点就是这个案件的真相到底是怎么回事啊？因为寻找案件的真相啊，就可以找出中国现在到底出了什么问题啊。我们知道中国这么大，你说发生1-2件孤立的案子也没什么奇怪的。但是如果这个案件啊都是针对危急人士，这就说明这个国家呀现在在价值这个导向方面，价值现实来讲出了一个大的问题。但是这些人的这个案件，包括这个现在东北发生的这个事情，我们都不知道到底是什么原因啊。这个是我觉得中国政府急于的给这个胡女士授予这么一个称号，我没有任何意见啊。你见义勇为也好，烈士也好，给他更高的荣誉也好，这都不是问题。问题是大家还是要找到这个案件的真相。
好，谢谢这个何明先生的点评啊。接下来就要聊到我们美国昨天晚上这个可以说是年度的政治的首秀啊。到底是什么呢？就是拜登总统和川普前总统的这一次辩论。那我们也知道啊，这一次的辩论呢，比以往来得更早一些。那么以往呢，往往是在这个民主党和共和党的全国代表大会已经确认了两党的候选人之后才举行辩论。这一次呢，是以在 CNN 进行一个媒体辩论的形式来进行的，也有可能就是这一次大选正式前夕唯一的一次辩论了，因此对于2位候选人来说，整个的机会以及风险都十分大。那么看完这一场辩论之后不知道小杨什么感受，何明先生什么感受？那何明先生你先说。
我今天打开美国的所有的这个网站英文网站，无论是《纽约时报》还是这个《华盛顿邮报》，还是《华尔街日报》，还是其他的几大电视网，甚至包括欧洲的这个网站，你都可以发现就是拜登表现非常差非常令人失望民主党是惊慌失措那么这个尤其是《纽约时报》就是发表很多文章，退选吧。其实这个退选不退选呢？如果你真的是了解点美国政治的话，这是半年以来或者1年以来大家的不断的在议论的话题。但是不要认为这一次的表现很糟糕，就有了一次更换人选的必然性。虽然呢，昨天晚上民主党人在紧急打电话在讨论，但是呢，民主现在已经是一个什么问题？这才是根本的问题。你就想一想，昨天的这个竞选，你能够看到任何新兴的力量吗？你能够看到美国这样一个伟大的国家在领导这个世界也好，保护这个世界也好能够有那种朝气吗？能够有那种力量吗？我看到我几乎主要的这个媒体我都看他们的这个事实核查，我这个发现事实核查都是说川普撒谎，拜登撒谎吹牛。你说这样一个最高层次的总统的这个竞选你们应该有基本的事实的掌握吧？你基本的事实都没有核实，就是上次这么胡诌。那你说这个伟大的美国最高的领导人都是这个样子，你们谁上去你能够给你一个道德上的标杆？你觉得给的一个力量的一个标杆？这个问题还不仅是发生在美国、英国，对吧？马上就会这个保守党大败，对吧？工党这个上来又怎么样呢？我跟英国的朋友讲你以为工党就会带来希望吗？对吧 ？OK， 我们再说法国马克龙有些中国人觉得马克龙还不错，对吧？又英俊又年轻，而且还有国际观也跟美国还看法不一样。你觉得马克龙现在陷入到什么漩涡对吧？马上就变成一个没什么权力的一个总统了，能改变吗？你觉得极右派上来会改变什么东西吗？那德国这个小尔茨是这个独闪这个现在这个陷阱还想继续拉下去他又能怎么样呢？对吧？你说日本现在这个民调已经20%还是多少，对吧？这个有史以来创造了记录了，应该是不是第一也是第二？你看看加拿大，对吧？ 加拿大这个多劳多啊，这个最近的这个其他的他的这个反对党的这个在一个地方选举中间呢，这个取得了这个胜利，对吧？一个地区，他也开始产生危机了。这个我们提出了一个问题，就是一战以来，今天正好是凡尔赛签订多少周年啊？28号嘛，6月28号啊。工业革命带来了市场经济，带来了法治，然后演化成了民主制度，演化成为了基于民主制度对人们的权利的保护，然后寻找出了不同的政党之间给人民的选择。但是现在的政党现象是什么？是两极化。两极化不仅是孤立的啊！你们老是欧洲的朋友说你们美国怎么糟糕，我说你们好到哪里去啊？你告诉我哪一个民主国家现在好到哪里去？那专制国家当然不好了，你不能说古巴好，你不能说越南好，你更不可能说朝鲜好，对吧？但是面临的民主的一个僵化的局面，一个老化的局面，现在没有动力去改变它。你以为很多人很亢奋，包括《纽约时报》一样的，现在好像找到换人的机会。你觉得为什么拜登会上来？你觉得为什么川普会上来？你搞清楚这个东西了吗？对吧？这个《纽约时报》，你真正找到问题的症结所在吗？对吧？你看看希拉里早上写的什么这个推文呐，我还要投给这个拜登，对吧？他当然不可能投给这个川普了。但是问题是你在这个时候要投给拜登，就意味着他也成为了认为拜登下台的可能性比较低嘛。所以这是一个民主的僵局这是个民主的僵局。发展中国家如果不从民主的僵局里面得到一些教训和启发，还是那种浪漫的看待一个变革，那就是发展国家的灾难。而民主国家怎么从现有的这个框架里面走出来，这是根本原因，不是什么川普一个人的问题，也不是拜登一个人的问题，是整个民主的老化、僵化和面临一个寻找新的动力源的问题。这个东西不找到解决，谁当总统也没用。
好，谢谢何明先生的点评这个问题很深入。今天稍后我们要为大家录制的这个华尔街论坛的周末版我们还在进行更加详细深入的讨论。小杨有没有看到这一场辩论？哪一些让你觉得印象特别深刻？
昨天9点我打开这个电脑，准备带着喝的吃的，准备这个好好看一场这个秀但是很遗憾，大概看到10几分钟的时候呢，我就睡着了。睡醒了之后呢，我就打算也不打算看下去了，因为拜登这边呢，他讲的这个他的语言或者是说他的发音让我戴着耳机呢是非常的难受，所以一觉醒来，我看到这个我的感觉跟不少人的感觉是一样的。那这个尤其是伊隆马斯克在他的这个 X 上发了一个推文说这一次的辩论呢没有赢家，唯一的赢家呢是这2位八旬老人呢，给网络上贡献了非常多的梗，或者是网络迷因图。那么，如果能够作为一个关心中美的一个关系的作为一个华语的观众来说，怎么去比较这一场辩论？就好比说，这个辩论可能就相当于这一场总统候选人的辩论，相较于美国来说，就相当于中国的春晚，相较于中国都非常的难看。但是呢，每次都会有。那具体到这2位八旬老人在这一次的辩论中谈论了什么？辩论是围绕着经济、移民、堕胎这个俄乌冲突以及对华政策展开。我看这一场辩论赛的其实报的唯一的目的呢，我只是想看一看呢2位八旬老人如何显示谁比谁对中国更狠。但很遗憾，我在这一次的这个辩论中似乎是没有看到对于中国的话题的提及呢，并不是非常的多。那从侧面或许也可以理解为其实无论谁在11月能够胜选，他们对中国的态度呢可能说2人呢真的是不分伯仲。那么拜登是强调他的这个执政成就以及在过去几年中的稳定性，而川普这一次他的口舌呢，相较于4年前来说比较凌厉，他一直在攻击拜登的一个施政表现。那么刚才正如李希所说，在这一场看起来非常对于民主党人非常糟糕的辩论结束之后民主党内是有很多的声音要讨论是不是要换掉拜登。那么其实在过去4年 如果是说你在美国生活，你可以很明显的感觉到这个穷人更穷富人更富这个问题怎么解决？那无论是未来川普可能胜选，或者是拜登可能胜选这是他们要解决的可能是最大的问题之一。但是在昨天的这个辩论之中他们怎么说？这两位八旬老人吧，基本上很少提及在未来会怎么做，只是这个回顾过去的如何维持了一个统治，或者是说如何做得好，或者是说攻击对方做得不好。这个呢，只能是说真的是一场美国的春晚，不看还可以，看了更闹心。
好，谢谢这个小杨的点评啊。的确，那么今天呢，我也是特别注意到了各大媒体对于这一场辩论的评论啊。那么几乎是一边倒的得出了一个结论，说这是一场史诗般的灾难啊。不仅仅是美国历史上最糟糕的一次辩论，甚至有位民主党的策略家说我几乎没有办法看完，我几次关掉电视，因为这样的一场辩论不仅仅让我觉得恐慌恐惧，让我觉得生理上的疼痛啊。那么整次辩论之前呢，其实大家对于两位候选人都有所了解，因为不是第一次交手了。但是这一次两位领导人的表现，特别是拜登总统，几乎是证实了外界对于他的所有的质疑批评，甚至是他的这个政治对手对于他的恶意贬低让大家觉得十分的不理解。有一些错误简直是让人觉得不知道到底是怎么回事。那比如说在场那么当时呢是被问及了一个有关于妇女堕胎权的问题。按理说这是拜登的一个好机会，因为在这个堕胎权的这个事情上民主党这一边的政策是美国选民比较支持的，可以说有关于堕胎问题是民主党的一个政策强项。结果呢，拜登总统答非所问，突然讲到了一位妇女被一个非法移民强奸的事情，直接就把整个问题的焦点从堕胎这样的一个对于民主党有利的问题，转到了非法移民这样一个对于民主党十分不利的问题。那么几次这个拜登总统呢显得表情僵硬没有办法听清楚他到底在说什么。而他的对手川普也是直接回击说，我根本不明白你在说什么，我也觉得你自己也不知道自己在说什么。出现了这样让人觉得十分尴尬的一幕那我们也特别看到，不管是这个拜登总统的好朋友《纽约时报》的专栏作家弗里德曼，还是我们中文朋友们比较熟悉的这个季思道先生，还是Ezra Klein 著名的《纽约时报》的播客节目的主持人，几乎所有人都以这样的一句话来为这一次辩论定调，就是该退出了全党劝退。不仅仅是拜登总统身边的这一些他信任的盟友，民主党的策略师，包括一些自由派媒体的主持人，也都认为整一次辩论是对于拜登极其不利的这样的一次情况。那么国际媒体对于整个辩论的评价与美国媒体基本上也是一致的。那么今天我特别注意到《经济学人》对于整场的辩论的评价叫做 horrendous， 就是让人触目惊心的糟糕的这样的一次情况那么有关于这个拜登现在退选还来不来得及，历史上有没有先例呢？我们也简单为大家进行一个回顾的确是有先例的。最近的一次是什么时候呢？是在1968年。当时美国社会对于越战的抗议是不断的升级。时任的总统约翰逊呢，在一次椭圆办公室的讲话中是宣布，我不再寻求，也不会接受民主党提名我为总统候选人。但是约翰逊当时发表这个声明是什么时候呢？是3月的时候。那我们一看，现在这个日期已经是将近7月了，到6月底了，所以这个已经是非常晚了。另外，我们也特别注意到，拜登已经获得了足够的党内提名代表。如果现在拜登决定退出，接下来的一个重要的环节就是在8月在俄亥俄州的这样的一次民主党全国委员会的一次大会。那么如果拜登宣布退出，那么当时呢可以有无承诺的选举代表选择其他的这样的一个候选人。那么现在呼声比较高的呢，一位是加州的州长纽森，另外一位呢是密歇根州的这一位州长Whitmer 叫做惠特曼女士格雷琴惠特曼女士。当然了，也有人提及副总统卡马拉哈里斯，但是普遍认为哈里斯的争议比之前提到的这2位要比较大。那么在整个的民主党的选举格局中呢，也处于比较弱势这样一个地位。 如果民主党全国委员会开完了之后，拜登再宣布退选，那会出现什么情况呢？这就让美国的政治会进入到了一个我们叫做没有人去过的这样的一个深水区啊。那么届时呢，民主党的党主席现在是杰米·哈里森，就需要和民主党的州长和国会议员进行商议啊，这在美国历史上也是没有过的举动，所以整个的情况是相当复杂的。那我今天也特别注意到有这个小道消息说，在今天呢，有2个重要的人物，一个是美国的前总统奥巴马，还有一个是拜登最信任的前幕僚长克莱恩，要坐下来和拜登好好谈一谈这个问题了。但是呢，也有人是非常坚持拜登一定要继续选下去，是谁呢？就是拜登总统的太太啊，吉尔拜登女士，现在呢是非常希望拜登继续坚持选下去，而同时啊，现在的副总统哈里斯表达了他的气愤和不满。为什么呢？因为在拜登出现了这样的竞选选举表现之后，民主党内重要的捐献者和民主党内的策略师普遍把目光聚焦在的是纽森和惠特曼身上，而不认为哈里斯应该获得进一步选举的资格。更重要的问题是什么呢？拜登的竞选已经筹集了超过3.4亿美元的资金，如果换任何一位候选人都要从头再来，那么现在这个情势啊，已经是十分的焦灼了。我也特别注意到，我们很熟悉的啊，报道中国事务而获得普利策奖，同时也是之前撰写的一本有关于拜登总统传记的啊，我们叫做欧义文先生啊，今天在接受CNN采访的时候就讲到了，说这个拜登总统有一个特点，他认为自己是一个明明是处在不利地位，但是可以扭转乾坤的人，他认为这是他的一个独特的优势。不管是在之前2020年的这次选举中，当时大家都不看好他，结果他最后扭转乾坤胜利了；还是在之前几次的这个民主党的这个议员的选举中，拜登认为他就是在最后一个可以扭转局势。所以这一次竞选的失败啊，反而可能更加深他自己的这样的一个信念，就是他只要继续坚持下去，就可能会扭转乾坤。尽管他最开始表现的不利，那么这也让拜登总统本人退选的可能性啊显得更加的渺茫。那我们也知道，现在的决定权其实呢不是在别人手里，而是在拜登总统自己这里。如果他自己决定一定要选下去，他已经获得了参选权的这样的一个多数票啊，那么民主党就必须要跟着拜登走到底。那么如果拜登总统自己回心转意呢，当然民主党要面临一系列的这个问题、危机以及前所未有的情况，但是也为民主党内推选出另外一位候选人打开了一片天地啊！所以在这样的一个情况下，我们也想请问一下和平先生，你认为民主党换人的几率有没有啊？在这样的一次事件之后，是不是对于美国的盟友接下来是对于美国的政策本身，特别是与拜登总统期间与盟友达成的一系列，不管是4国联盟也好，还是3国联盟也好，还是针对中国这样的一个芯片制裁联盟也好，产生更大的松动和不安啊。
这个首先我们讲这个美国的对外的这个战略在拜登时期跟川普是不一样川普是一阵大棒把凡是他认为看不过的一棍把它打散退出各种机制，包括7号协议都退出来了还有包括这个伊朗的核谈判也退出来了，极端的组织他也威胁退出，所以这些小兄弟们呢确实是比较恐慌，他们对拜登总统抱有的期望或者信心是要超过这个川普，这是一般的民调显示出来。但是川普拜登所建立的这种联盟的巩固的程度其实是大大不如冷战时候。原因很简单，原因是当今世界已经是一个呢，表面上还有国家意识有所谓的保守主义的倾向，但实际上全球化是谁都挡不住是所有的国家都是在艰难的想保住自己的利益，去避免进入到全球化的过程中间，其实这通通都是痴心梦想。包括这些小兄弟其实也一样的，无论是韩国的尹锡悦，还是这个日本的岸田文雄，还有这个欧洲的这些小兄弟，其实都是知道 于是跟美国完全绑在一起，美国能够满足你的这种经济和全球化的需求，那没问题。但是问题是，美国已经没有能力去满足每一个国家的这么强大的需求，所以这些国家一方面希望跟美国绑在一起有一个安全上的感觉，但是在另外一方面呢，又觉得呢这不安全因为我还不一定是不安全的问题，我需要追求市场。所以包括日本，你看到的是这个岸田文雄这么傻傻的，但是实际上这个日本的很多的这个地方政府跟中国是交往非常密切，而在韩国呢，这个他们的商界也是跟中国有紧密的合作关系，包括菲律宾也是这样，更不是说这个欧洲了。所以美国面临的一个呢对华政策方面的一个重新的一个大的改变，有2种方向，一种方向就是呢引爆中国，也把中国纳入到了美国能够控制的体系里面，美国的价值体系里面。第二种方式就是把中国往死里打就是更狠更厉害。不管牺牲我的利益也好，我先要把你中国给掐下来。所以这个未来的这个世界的这个震荡的局面尤其是我们介入在这个身在美国，同时我们也对中国的情况有一点了解，那确确实实大家的新闻是有在看的。那再回过头来讲我觉得这个李杰博士是非常了解美国的现在的这个民主党的这个这个状况民主党现在确实会马上面临到一个立即撕裂的危险。这种撕裂的危险就是呢有3派一派呢就是贺锦丽，他认为是当然的天然的一个取代这个拜登的一个人选，但是无论是党内和党外并不看好他，但是他是个爆破性的一个力量。第二个就是说，如果取代这个拜登，除了贺锦丽以外，除了纽森以外，除了这个密西根以外，还有这个宾州的州长，比如说这个还有交通部部长或者是我们还是不知道的哪一个角落里面的哪个人物人是有的。但是我还是要强调一点，无论换不换人美国的这个政治框架进入了一个民主的老化阶段，需要更新的力量去驱动它不是个年轻人的问题。你说法国哪一个30岁的年轻人、20岁的年轻人又怎么样呢？能够改变这个框架吗？我觉得年龄当然老化是肯定是不行的实在是跟这个国家正在如此一个巨大的转型阶段。其实每一个国家都面临一个巨大的转型阶段体力肯定是不支，何况是美国总统。但是光只是年轻还不是原因，根本的原因是呢需要对这个体制本身有新的认知。
好，谢谢这个和平先生点评那么节目正在进行中呢，也有一条突发消息，仍然是对于川普总统的好消息就是美国的最高法院在涉及到1月6号国会大厦叛乱的定罪问题中呢，是选择反对司法部，而是站在了这一些参与1月6号国会大厦这个叛乱的被告这一方认为呢之前这个2002年我们叫做安然法律就是针对安然公司破产的一项法律不适用，或者叫做限制这一项法律的适用范围。这项法律是什么呢？这项法律大致就是把妨碍进行官方的程序定为犯罪。那我们也知道1月6号的这一些这个去国会大厦参与叛乱的人呢，如果他们呢在这样的一个这个安然法律适用的一个情况下，很有可能会被定罪，这也直接涉及到川普总统本人的案件目前呢，受到这样的一个判决的影响的可能有数百起诉讼。当然，大家最关注的就是有关于前总统川普涉及的刑事案件所以这个消息一出呢，也是对于川普的一个好消息。那么呢，也让很多现在对于美国大选关心的人更增加了几分不确定性。那么有关于这个 Enron Law 到底是什么？当时美国的这个法院是怎样通过这样一部法律获得了这个 Enron 公司所持有的大量的文件？那我们今天呢，在6度解析栏目中再为大家进行详细的介绍。有关于美国时政，我们今天暂时为大家讲到这里接下来要讲到的是中国政坛以及中国经济的一系列变化。3中全会即将召开了。今天早上来自南华早报的报道特别介绍到了，年已过90旬的改革派经济学家吴敬琏先生是特别指出，在10年前2013年的这个3中全会上 就特别指出要让市场成为整个经济发展的决定性力量。但是现在10年之后，仍然有很多反对改革的因素，仍然没有看到市场在资源配置中的决定性作用到底有哪一些体现啊？那么3中全会之后是不是会出现新的迹象呢？南华早报的文章还透露了怎样的信息？我们是不是想要简单介绍一下？
那么在这个新闻之中啊，那么这个文章先是给大家来回顾了10多年前，那么在2013年的时候，当时中国还设立了一个上海自贸区、上海自由贸易区，作为经济改革的一个试验田。尽管在多年的过程中，这个试点取得了成功，但是在全国范围内的市场改革进展仍然是非常缓慢的。那再回到10年后的现在，尽管现在中国经济面临着房地产危机、地方财政的困境，以及青年失业率这个居高不下的一个问题，但是那似乎是这个中央政府对于改革是不是要有新的动作，要有更大的动作那么对于市场来说没有给出一个非常明晰的回答。那许多经济学家认为，北京不完整的市场改革就是当前经济低迷的部分原因。那这样的一句话，或者是这样的一个看法，在过去的一段时间的华尔街论坛中那不仅是这一位经济学家，还有多位经济学家呢都有类似的看法。而在即将召开的这个3中全会前，市场最为关注的就是中国是否会偏离让市场在资源配置中起决定性作用的一个基本原则。其实呢，这个中国最高领导人习近平在多个场合都提到过改革，而强调的深化改革是推动中国式现代化的一个根本动力。那结合到习近平如此坚持的一个执念，有分析师们就预计3中全会可能就会讨论现代工业体系、企业治理以及科技，还有财政以及货币政策这几个大类。那么有人都说这个习近平在过去10年开倒车，10年开倒车。那是不是在现在这个中国的改革被认为是从张开双臂到过去从张开双臂逐渐变成了风险防范成为永恒的主题？那在这一次3中全会上，那这样一个永远提防范风险的趋势会不会就此刹住这个呢，也可能也是在这个周末很多人关心的一个话题，或者是说一个争议的焦点了。那对于这样的一篇文章对于又有经济学家来谈论3中全会到底谈什么，到底谈怎样的改革何冰先生怎么看？
我基本上不同意吴金林先生的看法吴先生呢已经为改革开放呼吁了几十年和厉宁这些人一样的名声很大那么实际上讲的都是一些非常粗浅的一些一般性的这种西方式的这种概念，在中国这种保守的框架之下，它这种概念会带来某一种驱动力某一些大家感觉到应该往这个方向走。但是呢，我觉得如果是老先生真的是对现在的经济、现在的政治转型，尤其是对这些发展中国家出现的转型增加存在的问题，尤其对西方国家的极化经济、极化政治有一些基本的认知，就知道中国这样一个既有传统的几千年的文化的底蕴的问题，也有基本上的经济结构过分的农村化的一个问题，也有这个意识形态共产党也好，这个苏联式的体制也好，也有新的这个利益集团混杂在一起的这样一个体制，也有一批思想已经开明的比西方还要西方的一批人，这样一个巨大的盘在中国的这个变革中间应该怎么办？无非不是两种方式，对吧？一种方式呢就是呢完全走向西方化符合市场经济、符合现代民主法治的这种机制的要求大胆的开放，大胆的往前走。还有一种方式呢就是倒退回去。但是实际上呢，中国两种方式都不会走既不会走急速的西方式的全面开放的这么一种体系，因为这个体系并没有搞出一个非常好的样板出来，至少在贫富差距，对吧？政治极化方面，现在并不是像冷战之后的那么一种闪亮这是经济要素呢。那从这个保守腔回去了，你觉得怎么回去把门关起来？你觉得去完全又是搞真正意义上的国计民泰你觉得真正就把这个民营企业给打击我觉得都不会走。中国恰恰是呢不可能再走两个极化的道路， 既不会走浪漫的市场经济、民主自由的道路，也不会走保守僵化的回到毛泽东时代的道路，更不可能回到文革50年代公私合营的道路。中国是一个交错型的一个缓慢的，但是更加稳重的长时间的发展规划。这一场变革在1980年的时候开放的时候，没有想到爆发力那么强，也没有想到积累问题这么多，也没有感觉到自己原来学习的西方本身也有问题。所以这些因素混在一起，让中国的这一场变革的时间，使人类历史上很罕见的一次变革时间，长达至少50年。甚至100年才能真正意义上的完成它的这个体制变革。所以我们将会看到的三中全会实际上比很多悲观的人想象的要好的很多它会有很多的具体性的针对性的规划性的发展规划，但是也比那些过分乐观的人悲观的很多，它不会给人的感觉闪亮的一个奇迹出来。从体制本身来讲，它将会是超预期的一个发展规划，但是在浪漫的期待方面它不是那么一个鼓励人心的这么一个口号它是一个更具有某一种仍然是有一种政府主导型的强有力主导型的一个产业的变革一个经济体系的完成，这种完成你用简单的吴先生这种市场化的观点太简单了，太单薄了。但是他老人家已经90岁了，你怎么能去求人家呢？但是呢，从南华早报这种媒体这么重要的一个媒体，还去找这些老先生，尤其是最近访问的一些人，简直是太 ABC 了。你到了今天这种地步，你对这个当今的世界、当今的中国存在的问题还没有一点深刻的认知，对吧？还是在找了一些这个很 ABC 的东西在那讲了，那是80年代的东西
好，谢谢何斌先生的点评接下来要说到人事变动，有关于魏凤和和李尚福的人事交易，昨天在华尔街论坛中蒋宇和斌先生在第一时间为大家进行了分析和报道。同样是来自南华早报的一篇报道今天特别引述分析人士说这一次习近平的动怒可能比在10几年前处理徐才厚和郭伯雄的时候更甚。为什么呢？因为李尚福是自己提拔上来的人，人家说人生最大的悲哀和痛苦就是被自己人捅了一刀子。这个说法有没有道理？习近平这一次是不是真的愤怒更甚于10年前何明先生？
是的，你刚才已经把话也抵出来了。其实我们的人的一生就是我们都每一个人不管你是谁，无论你是在美国搞企业，你可以现在看到欧美的这种权力斗争，还是这个做媒体的人，现在在《纽约时报》、《华尔街日报》，最近尤其是丑态百出的《华盛顿邮报》，对吧？还有政客无数的这个，只要有人的地方总是会有各种背叛，总是有各种各样的分歧，总是有各种各样的搞笑的事情发生。对于习近平来讲，他确实是就是既痛苦也愤怒。为什么呢？因为他让戈伯雄这些人徐才厚这些人都是老江湖的，是邓小平那个时候搞的人物，对吧？我把你收拾我不心痛但是问题是，无论是魏凤和还是这个李尚福这些人，都是自己亲自挑选而且还每个人去谈了话了，对不对？对吧？应该是交了心的。所以今天《华盛顿邮报》有一篇文章这个里面有一句话引起我的注意，我没看中共的东西，我不知道他们怎么说的他大概的意思是说了，就是他在这个议案的会议上来讲你最好是在我发现你问题之前交代。这句话就是讲到了这个点子上去了，就是说背叛有时候是真的是一种不仅仅是一种愤怒，而且是一种内心的一种痛苦。但是问题是，光只是体制也未必能够把所有的问题给解决，但是你得有基本的体制这个体制是完全你习近平的火眼金睛去看待这个人，你并没有经过一个完善的体制进行这个反复的调查。中国虽然有所谓的审计，军队也有审计系统了现在审计现在好像提到了一个更高的位置来讲是要反复去审查。但是问题是，整个的军队体系是昨天我讲的是黑箱中间的黑箱，是彼此互相包庇彼此互相包庇才能得到好处，才能升官。那这样的话，你审计有什么用对不对？反正你自己人审计自己的人嘛， 对吧？否则的话，全世界人类历史，你告诉我哪一个真的除了我昨天讲的，除了是真的政变，否则说你告诉我哪一个国家会搞成第1号人物有问题，第2号人物有问题，第3号人物有问题，第4号人物有问题，第5号人物有问题，第6号人物有问题，全部有问题。那你觉得难道不是这个系统性问题吗？所以这不是习近平你的胡搅经济出了问题，也不是说李尚福或者魏鹤和出了问题，是因为整个机制是培养贪污腐化的贪官的问题。这个问题不解决，那你是没有用的。即使是有了这个问题，你都会难以避免，何况你这个问题不能解决呢？所以跑到古亭去开会啊，跑到延安去开会啊，我就觉得很搞笑。为什么呢？因为延安和古亭都没有解决共产党的腐败问题啊。不但没有解决腐败问题，而且是非常严重啊，对吧？在红军长城那么艰苦的道上，老毛干什么？对不对？对吧？你到延安的那个地方，老毛干什么？对不对？老毛吃什么？老毛见的什么人？对吧？腐败是从古田、在延安，甚至从这个江西的时候就开始的，不是说进了城的腐败，只是进了城以后更腐败而已。你根子上不能找到，我们还是应该的。所以我在说嘛，虽然西方有各种各样的问题，但是站在中国这样一个发展中国家来讲，你还是得老老实实学习一下西方是怎么在腐败的这个体制上来讲，大体上还做得相对的比较廉洁的真的你说美国真的有没有问题？我看华文媒体好像没有注意。我记得有一天头一看《华盛顿邮报》一篇文章，说几十个吧，还是10几个上将美国海军上将都受到调查和问题对吧？也是有这样的问题的，不是有人的地方就有腐败，有人的地方就有背叛，有人的地方就有这种江湖。但是呢，中国的真正的这个江湖，如果不从根本上改变的话，未来还是会出来。所以等到更高的官出来，或者是更多的上将出来，也不要奇怪。
好，谢谢这个何明先生点评，特别感谢给我们打赏的朋友。虽然我们没有腐败的资格，但是你们的打赏对于我们节目是相当大的支持。等攒够了钱，我们或许可以出去腐败一顿谢谢金山，谢谢甜甜，谢谢麦团，谢谢云水，谢谢如是我闻，感谢这些观众朋友们对于我们的支持。下周的华尔街论坛我们再会。
Let's start with the issue that voters consistently say is their top concern, the economy. President Biden, inflation has slowed, but prices remain high. Since you took office, the price of essentials has increased. For example, a basket of groceries that cost $100 then now costs more than $120. And typical home prices have jumped more than 30%. What do you say to voters who feel they are worse off under your presidency than they were under President Trump?
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president and what Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall. The pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was, it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach into your arm. You'll be all right. The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible. And so what we had to do is try to put things back together again. And that's exactly what we began to do. We created 15,000 new jobs. We brought out the position where we have 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. But there's more to be done. There's more to be done. Working class people are still in trouble. I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I come of a household where the kitchen table, if the things weren't able to be met during the month, it was a problem. Price of eggs, the price of gas, the price of housing, the price of a whole range of things. That's why I'm working so hard to make sure I deal with those problems. That we're going to make sure that we reduce the price of housing. We're going to make sure we build 2 million new units. We're going to make sure we cap rents so corporate greed can't take over. The combination, what I was left with in corporate greed, is the reason why we're in this problem right now. In addition to that, we're in a situation where if you take a look at all that was done in his administration, he didn't do much at all. By the time he left, things were in chaos. Literally chaos. And so we put things back together. We created, I said, those jobs. We make sure we had a situation where we brought down the price of prescription drugs, which is a major issue for many people, to $15 for an insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they can include beginning next year. And the situation is and we're going to make that available to everybody, to all Americans. So we're working to bring down the price around the kitchen table, and that's what we're going to get done.
Thank you. President Trump?
We have the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID. And when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929. By the time we finished, so we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars, and so many other things. Everything was rocking good. But the thing we never got the credit for, and we should have, is getting us out of that COVID mess. He created mandates that was a disaster for our country. But other than that, we had given them back a country where the stock market actually was higher than pre-COVID, and nobody thought that was even possible. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs, a bounce-back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
Thank you. President Biden?
Well, look, the greatest economy in the world, he's the only one who thinks that, I think. I don't know anybody else who thinks he had the greatest economy in the world. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that we found ourselves in a situation where his economy, he rewarded the wealthy. He had the largest tax cut in American history, $2 trillion. He raised a deficit larger than any president has in any one term. He's the only president other than Herbert Hoover who's lost more jobs than he had when he began, since Herbert Hoover. The idea that he did something that was significant. And the military, you know, when he was president, they were still killing people in Afghanistan. He didn't do anything about that. When he was president, we were still finding ourselves in a position where you had a notion that we were this safe country. The truth is, I'm the only president this century that doesn't have any, this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world like he did.
President Trump, I want to follow up if I can.
Am I allowed to respond to him?
Well, I'm going to ask you a follow-up. You can do whatever you want with the minute that we give you. I want to follow up. You want to impose a 10% tariff on all goods coming into the U.S. How will you ensure that that doesn't drive prices even higher?
It's not going to drive them higher. It's just going to cause countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China, it's going to just force them to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things. But he made a statement. The only thing he was right about is I gave you the largest tax cut in history. I also gave you the largest regulation cut in history. That's why we had all the jobs. And the jobs went down, and then they bounced back, and he's taking credit for bounce-back jobs. You can't do that. He also said he inherited 9% inflation. No, he inherited almost no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 months. And then it blew up under his leadership because they spent money like a bunch of people that didn't know what they were doing. And they don't know what they were doing. It was the worst, probably the worst administration in history. There's never been. And as far as Afghanistan is concerned, I was getting out of Afghanistan, but we were getting out with dignity, with strength, with power. He got out. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country's life.
President Trump, over the last 8 years, under both of your administrations, the national debt soared to record highs. And according to a new nonpartisan analysis, President Trump, your administration approved $8.4 trillion in new debt, while so far, President Biden, you've approved $4.3 trillion in new debt. So, former President Trump, many of the tax cuts that you signed into law are set to expire next year. You want to extend them and go even further, you say. With the U.S. facing trillion-dollar deficits and record debt, why should top earners and corporations pay even less in taxes than they do now?
Because the tax cuts spurred the greatest economy that we've ever seen just prior to COVID. And even after COVID, it was so strong that we were able to get through COVID much better than just about any other country. But we spurred, that tax spurred. Now, when we cut the taxes, as an example, the corporate tax was cut down to 21% from 39%, plus beyond that. We took in more revenue with much less tax, and companies were bringing back trillions of dollars back into our country. The country was going like never before, and we were ready to start paying down debt. We were ready to start using the liquid gold right under our feet, the oil and gas right under our feet. We were going to have something that nobody else has had. We got hit with COVID. We did a lot to fix it. I gave him an unbelievable situation with all of the therapeutics and all of the things that we came up with. We gave him something great. Remember, more people died under his administration, even though we had largely fixed it. More people died under his administration than our administration, and we were right in the middle of it, something which a lot of people don't like to talk about. But he had far more people dying in his administration. He did the mandate, which is a disaster, mandating it. The vaccine went out. He did a mandate on the vaccine, which is the thing that people most objected to about the vaccine. And he did a very poor job, just a very poor job. And I will tell you, not only poor there, but throughout the entire world, we're no longer respected as a country. They don't respect our leadership. They don't respect the United States anymore. We're like a third world nation between weaponization of his election, trying to go after his political opponent. All of the things he's done, we've become like a third world nation, and it's a shame. The damage he's done to our country, and I'd love to ask him, and will, why he allowed millions of people to come in here from prisons, jails, and mental institutions to come into our country and destroy our country.
President Trump, we will get to immigration later in this block. President Biden, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this question about the national debt.
He had the largest national debt of any president in a 4-year period, number one. Number two, that $2 trillion tax cut benefited the very wealthy. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. I mean, billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our health care system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare because all of these people are coming in. They're putting them on Medicare. They're putting them on Social Security. They're going to destroy Social Security. This man is going to single-handedly destroy Social Security. These millions and millions of people coming in, they're trying to put them on Social Security. He will wipe out Social Security. He will wipe out Medicare. So he was right in the way he finished that sentence. And it's a shame. What's happened to our country in the last 4 years is not to be believed. Foreign countries, I'm friends with a lot of people, they cannot believe what happened to the United States of America. We're no longer respected. They don't like us. We give them everything they want, and they think we're stupid. They think we're very stupid people. What we're doing for other countries, and they do nothing for us. What this man has done is absolutely criminal.
Thank you, President Trump. Dana?
This is the first presidential election since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. This morning, the court ruled on yet another abortion case, temporarily allowing emergency abortions to continue in Idaho, despite that state's restrictive ban. Former President Trump, you take credit for the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, which returned the issue of abortion to the states.
Correct.
However, the federal government still plays a role in whether or not women have access to abortion pills. They're used in about 2/3 of all abortions. As president, would you block abortion medication?
First of all, the Supreme Court just approved the abortion pill, and I agree with their decision to have done that, and I will not block it. And if you look at this whole question that you're asking, complex but not really complex. 51 years ago, you had Roe v. Wade, and everybody wanted to get it back to the states. Everybody, without exception. Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives. Everybody wanted it back. Religious leaders. And what I did is I put 3 great Supreme Court justices on the court, and they happened to vote in favor of killing Roe v. Wade and moving it back to the states. This is something that everybody wanted. Now, 10 years ago or so, they started talking about how many weeks and how many this, getting into other things. But every legal scholar throughout the world, the most respected, wanted it brought back to the states. I did that. Now the states are working it out. If you look at Ohio, it was a decision that was, an end result that was a little bit more liberal than you would have thought. Kansas, I would say the same thing. Texas is different. Florida is different. But they're all making their own decisions right now. And right now, the states control it. That's the vote of the people. Like Ronald Reagan, I believe in the exceptions. I am a person that believes. And frankly, I think it's important to believe in the exceptions. Some people, you have to follow your heart. Some people don't believe in that. But I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. I think it's very important. Some people don't. Follow your heart. But you have to get elected also. And because that has to do with other things. You got to get elected. The problem they have is they're radical because they will take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. After birth, if you look at the former governor of Virginia, he was willing to do this. He said, we'll put the baby aside and we'll determine what we do with the baby, meaning we'll kill the baby. What happened is we brought it back to the states, and the country is now coming together on this issue. It's been a great thing.
Thank you. President Biden?
It's been a terrible thing, what you've done. The fact is that the vast majority of constitutional scholars supported Roe when it was decided. Supported Roe. And that's this idea that they were all against it is just ridiculous. And this is the guy who says the state should be able to have it. We're in a state where in 6 weeks, you don't even know whether you're pregnant or not, but you cannot see a doctor, and have him decide on what your circumstances are, whether you need help. The idea that states are able to do this is a little like saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states, let each state have a different rule. Look, there's so many young women who have been, including a young woman who just was murdered, and he went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an immigrant coming in. They talk about that, but here's the deal: there's a lot of young women are being raped by their in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters, it's just ridiculous, and they can do nothing about it. And they try to arrest them when they cross state lines.
Thank you.
There have been many young women murdered by the same people he allows to come across our border. We have a border that's the most dangerous place anywhere in the world, considered the most dangerous place anywhere in the world. And he opened it up, and these killers are coming into our country, and they are raping and killing women. And it's a terrible thing. As far as the abortion is concerned, it is now back with the states. The states are voting. In many cases, it's frankly a very liberal decision. In many cases, it's the opposite. But they're voting, and it's bringing it back to the vote of the people, which is what everybody wanted, including the founders, if they knew about this issue, which, frankly, they didn't. But they would have, everybody wanted brought back. Ronald Reagan wanted it brought back. He wasn't able to get it. Everybody wanted it brought back, and many presidents had tried to get it back. I was the one to do it. And again, this gives it the vote of the people, and that's where they wanted it. Every legal scholar wanted it that way.
Staying on the topic of abortion, President Biden, 7 states, I'll let you do that. This is the same topic. 7 states have no legal restrictions on how far into a pregnancy a woman can obtain an abortion. Do you support any legal limits on how late a woman should be able to terminate a pregnancy?
I supported Roe v. Wade, which had 3 trimesters. The first time is between the woman and the doctor. Second time is between the doctor and an extreme situation. The third time is between the doctor, between the woman and the state. The idea that the politicians, that the founders wanted the politicians to be the ones making decisions about women's health is ridiculous. That's the last. No politician should be making that decision. A doctor should be making those decisions. That's how it should be run. That's what you're going to do. And if I'm elected, I'm going to restore Roe v. Wade.
So that means he can take the life of the baby in the 9th month and even after birth, because some states, Democrat run, take it after birth. Again, the former governor of Virginia, put the baby down, then we decide what to do with it. So he's willing to, as we say, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month and kill the baby. Nobody wants that to happen, Democrat or Republican. Nobody wants it to happen.
You're lying. That is simply not true. The Roe v. Wade does not provide for that. That's not the circumstance. Only if a woman's life is in danger, she's going to die. That's the only circumstance in which that can happen. But we are not for late-term abortion, period. Period, period.
Under Roe v. Wade, you have late-term abortion. You can do whatever you want, depending on the state. You can do whatever you want. We don't think that's a good thing. We think it's a radical thing. We think the Democrats are the radicals, not the Republicans.
For 51 years, that was the law. 51 years, constitutional scholarship said it was the right way to go. 51 years, and it was taken away because this guy put very conservative members on the Supreme Court. He takes credit for taking it away. What's he going to do? What's he going to do, in fact, if the MAGA Republicans, he gets elected, and the MAGA Republicans control the Congress, and they pass a universal ban on abortion, period, across the board at 6 weeks or 7 or 8 or 10 weeks, something very, very conservative. Is he going to sign that bill? I'll veto it. He'll sign it.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to the issue of immigration and border security. President Biden, a record number of migrants have illegally crossed the southern border on your watch. Overwhelming border states and overburdening cities such as New York and Chicago, and in some cases causing real safety and security concerns. Given that, why should voters trust you to solve this crisis?
Because we worked very hard to get a bipartisan agreement that not only changed all of that, it made sure that we are in a situation where you had no circumstance where they could come across the border with the number of border police there are now. We significantly increased the number of asylum officers. By the way, the Border Patrol endorsed my position. In addition to that, we found ourselves in a situation where when he was president, he was separating babies from their mothers, putting them in cages, making sure the families were separated. That's not the right way to go. What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look, we had the safest border in the history of our country. The border, all he had to do was leave it. All he had to do was leave it. He decided to open up our border, open up our country to people that are from prisons, people that are from mental institutions, insane asylum, terrorists. We have the largest number of terrorists coming into our country right now, all terrorists, all over the world, not just in South America, all over the world. They come from the Middle East, everywhere. All over the world, they're pouring in. And this guy just left it open. And he didn't need legislation because I didn't have legislation. I said, close the border. We had the safest border in history. In that final couple of months of my presidency, we had, according to Border Patrol, who is great, and by the way, who endorsed me for president, but I won't say that, but they endorsed me for president. Brandon, just speak to him. But look, we had the safest border in history. Now we have the worst border in history. There's never been anything like it. And people are dying all over the place, including the people that are coming up in caravans.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden?
The only terrorist who's done anything crossing the border is one who came along and killed under his administration, killed an al-Qaeda person come in his administration, killed 3 American soldiers, killed 3 American soldiers. That's the only terrorist that's there. I'm not saying that no terrorist ever got through, but the idea they're emptying their prisons, we're welcoming these people, that's simply not true. There's no data to support what he said. Once again, he's exaggerating, he's lying.
President Trump, staying on the topic of immigration, you've said that you're going to carry out, quote, the largest domestic deportation operation in American history, unquote. Does that mean that you will deport every undocumented immigrant in America, including those who have jobs, including those whose spouses are citizens, and including those who have lived here for decades? And if so, how will you do it?
Just 1 second. He said we killed 3 people. The people we killed are al-Baghdadi and Soleimani, the 2 greatest terrorists, biggest terrorists anywhere in the world, and it had a huge impact on everything, not just border, on everything. He's the one that killed people with the bad water, including hundreds of thousands of people dying, and also killing our citizens when they come in. We are living right now in a rat's nest. They're killing our people in New York, in California, in every state in the union, because we don't have borders anymore. Every state is now a border. And because of his ridiculous, insane, and very stupid policies, people are coming in and they're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen. We call it migrant crime. I call it Biden migrant crime. They're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen before. And you're reading it like these 3 incredible young girls over the last few days. One of them, I just spoke to the mother, and They just had the funeral for this girl, 12 years old. This is horrible what's taken place. What's taken place in our country, we're literally an uncivilized country now. He doesn't want it to be. He just doesn't know. He opened the borders. Nobody's ever seen anything like. And we have to get a lot of these people out, and we have to get them out fast because they're going to destroy our country. Just take a look at where they're living. They're living in luxury hotels in New York City and other places. Our veterans are on the street. They're dying because he doesn't care about our veterans. He doesn't care. He doesn't like the military at all, and he doesn't care about our veterans. Nobody been worse. I had the highest approval rating for veterans taking care of the VA. He has the worst. He's gotten rid of all the things that I approved. Joyce, that I got through Congress, all of the different things I approved, they abandoned. We had by far the highest, and now it's down in less than half because he's done all these great things that we did. And I think he did it just because I approved it, which is crazy. But he has killed so many people at our border by allowing all of these people to come in. And it's a very sad day in America.
President Biden, you have the mic.
Every single thing he said is a lie. Every single one. For example, veterans are a hell of a lot better off since I passed the PACT Act. 1 million of them now have insurance, and their families have it. Their families have it because what happened, whether it was Agent Orange or burn pits, they're all being covered now. And his group opposed that. We're also in a situation where we have great respect for veterans. My son spent a year in Iraq, living next to one of those burn pits, came back with stage 4 glioblastoma. I was recently in France for D-Day, and I spoke all about those heroes that died. I went to the World War I cemetery he refused to go to. He was standing with his 4-star general, and he told me, he said, I don't want to go in there because they're a bunch of losers and suckers. My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker. You're the loser.
President Trump?
First of all, that was a made-up quote, suckers and losers. They made it up. It was in a third-rate magazine that's failing, like many of these magazines. He made that up. He put it in commercials. We've notified him. We had 19 people that said I didn't say it. And think of this. Who would say I'm at a cemetery or I'm talking about our veterans? Because nobody's taken better care. I'm so glad this came up, and he brought it up. There's nobody that's taken better care of our soldiers than I have. To think that I would, in front of generals and others, say suckers and losers. We have 19 people that said it was never said by me. It was made up by him, just like Russia was made up, just like the 51 intelligence agents are made up, just like the new thing with the 16 economists are talking. It's the same thing. 51 intelligence agents said that the laptop was Russia disinformation. It wasn't. That came from his son, Hunter. It wasn't Russia disinformation. He made up the suckers and losers, so he should apologize to me right now.
4-star general standing to your side who was on your staff who said you said it, period. That's number one. And number two, the idea that I have to apologize to you for anything along the lines. We've done more for veterans than any president has in American history. And they now are in their family. The only sacred obligation we have as a country is to care for our veterans when they come home and their families and equip them when they go to war. That's what we're doing. That's what the VA is doing now. They're doing more for veterans than ever before in our history.
All right, thank you so much.
Let's move to the topic of foreign policy. I want to begin with Russia's war against Ukraine, which is now in its 3rd year. Former President Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he'll only end this war if Russia keeps the Ukrainian territory it has already claimed and Ukraine abandons its bid to join NATO. Are Putin's terms acceptable to you?
First of all, our veterans and our soldiers can't stand this guy. They can't stand him. They think he's the worst commander-in-chief, if that's what you call him, that we've ever had. They can't stand him. So let's get that straight. And they like me more than just about any of them. And that's based on every single bit of information. As far as Russia and Ukraine, if we had a real president, the president that knew, that was respected by Putin, he would have never invaded Ukraine. A lot of people are dead right now, much more than people know. You know, they talk about numbers. You can double those numbers, maybe triple those numbers. He did nothing to stop it. In fact, I think he encouraged Russia from going in. I'll tell you what happened. He was so bad with Afghanistan. It was such a horrible embarrassment, most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, that when Putin watched that and he saw the incompetence, that he should have fired those generals, like I fired the one that you mentioned. And so he's got no love lost, but he should have fired those generals. No general got fired for the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, Afghanistan, where we left billions of dollars of equipment behind. We lost 13 beautiful soldiers, and 38 soldiers were obliterated. And by the way, we left people behind, too. We left American citizens behind. When Putin saw that, he said, you know what? I think we're going to go in and maybe take this was his dream. I talked to him about it, his dream. The difference is he never would have invaded Ukraine, never. Just like Israel would have never been invaded in a million years by Hamas. You know why? Because Iran was broke with me. I wouldn't let anybody do business with them. They ran out of money. They were broke. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for anything, no money for terror. That's why you had no terror at all during my administration. This place, the whole world is blowing up under him.
President Biden?
I've never heard so much malarkey in my whole life. Look, the fact of the matter is that we're in a situation where, let's take the last point first. Iran attacked American troops, caused brain damage for a number of these troops, and he did nothing about it. Recently, not when he was president. They attacked. He said they're just having headaches. That's all it is. He didn't do a thing when the attack took place, number one. Number two, we got over 100,000 Americans and others out of Afghanistan during that airlift. Number three, we found ourselves in a situation where, if you take a look at what Trump did in Ukraine, this guy told Trump, do whatever you want, and do whatever you want. And that's exactly what Trump did to Putin, encourage him, do whatever you want. And he went in. And listen to what he said when he went in. He was going to take Kyiv in 5 days, remember? Because it's part of the old Soviet Union. That's what he wanted to reestablish, Kyiv. And he, in fact, didn't do it at all. He wasn't able to get it done. And they've lost thousands and thousands of troops, 500,000 troops.
President Trump,
I never said that.
For 1 minute, I just want to go back to my original question, which is, are Putin's terms acceptable to you? Keeping the territory in Ukraine?
Acceptable. No, they're not acceptable. But look, this is a war that never should have started. If we had a leader in this war, he led everybody along. He's given $200 billion now or more to Ukraine. He's given $200 billion. That's a lot of money. I don't think there's ever been anything like it. Every time that Zelensky comes to this country, he walks away with $60 billion. He's the greatest salesman ever. And I'm not knocking him. I'm not knocking anything. I'm only saying the money that we're spending on this war, and we shouldn't be spending, it should have never happened. I will have that war settled between Putin and Zelensky as president-elect before I take office on January 20th. I'll have that war settled. People being killed so needlessly, so stupidly, and I will get it settled, and I'll get it settled fast before I take office.
President Biden, you have a minute.
The fact is that Putin is a war criminal. He's killed thousands and thousands of people. And he has made one thing clear. He wants to reestablish what was part of the Soviet Empire, not just a piece. He wants all of Ukraine. That's what he wants. And then do you think he'll stop there? Do you think he'll stop when if he takes Ukraine? What do you think happens to Poland? What do you think of Belarus? What do you think happens to those NATO countries? And so if you want a war, you ought to find out what he's going to do, because if in fact he does what he says and walks away, and by the way, all that money we give Ukraine are from weapons we make here in the United States. We give them the weapons, not the money at this point. And our NATO allies have produced as much funding for Ukraine as we have. That's why we're strong.
Thank you. Moving on to the Middle East. In October, Hamas attacked Israel, killing more than 1,000 people and taking hundreds of hostages. Among those held and thought to still be alive are 5 Americans. Israel's response has killed thousands of Palestinians and created a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. President Biden, you've put forward a proposal to resolve this conflict, but so far Hamas has not released the remaining hostages, and Israel is continuing its military offensive in Gaza. So what additional leverage will you use to get Hamas and Israel to end the war? You have 2 minutes.
Number one, everyone from the United Nations Security Council straight through to the G7 to the Israelis and Netanyahu himself have endorsed the plan I put forward. Which has 3 stages to it. The first stage is trade the hostages for a ceasefire. Second phase is a ceasefire with additional conditions. The third phase is the end of the war. The only one who wants the war to continue is Hamas, number one. They're the only ones standing out. We're still pushing hard to get them to accept. In the meantime, what's happened? In Israel, we're finding that the only thing I've denied Israel was 2,000-pound bombs. They don't work very well in populated areas. They kill a lot of innocent people. We're providing Israel with all the weapons they need and when they need them. And by the way, I'm the guy that organized the world against Iran when they had a full-blown intercontinental ballistic missile attack on Israel. No one was hurt. No one Israeli was accidentally killed, and it just stopped. We saved Israel. We are the biggest producer of support for Israel of anyone in the world. And so there are 2 different things. Hamas cannot be allowed to be continued. We continue to send our experts and our intelligence people as to how they can get Hamas like we did bin Laden. You don't have to do it. And by the way, they've been greatly weakened, Hamas, greatly weakened, and they should be. They should be eliminated. But you've got to be careful for using certain weapons among population centers.
Just going back to Ukraine for 1 second. We have an ocean separating us. The European nations together have spent $100 billion, or maybe more than that, less than us. Why doesn't he call them and say, you got to put up your money like I did with NATO? I got them to put up hundreds of billions of dollars. The Secretary General of NATO said Trump did the most incredible job I've ever seen. They wouldn't have any. They were going out of business. We were spending almost 100% of the money was paid by us. He didn't do that. He's getting all. You got to ask these people to put up the money. We're over $100 billion more spent, and it has a bigger impact on them because of location, because we have an ocean in between. You got to ask them. As far as Israel and Hamas, Israel's the one that wants to go. He said the only one that wants to keep going is Hamas. Actually, Israel is the one, and you should let him go and let him finish the job. He doesn't want to do it. He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one.
President Biden, you have a minute.
I've never heard so much foolishness. This is a guy who wants to get out of NATO. Are you going to stay in NATO? He's going to pull out of NATO. The idea that our strength lies in our alliances as well. It may be a big ocean, but we're ever able to avoid a war in Europe, a major war in Europe? What happens if, in fact, you have Putin continue to go into NATO? We have an Article 5 agreement. Attack on one is attack on all. You want to start the nuclear war he keeps talking about, go ahead. Let Putin go in and control Ukraine and then move on to Poland and other places. See what happens then. He has no idea what the hell he's talking about. And by the way, I got 50 other nations around the world to support Ukraine, including Japan and South Korea, because they understand that this kind of dislocation has a serious threat to the whole world peace. No major war in Europe has ever been able to be contained just to Europe.
President Trump, just to follow up, would you support the creation of an independent Palestinian state in order to achieve peace in the region?
I'd have to see, but before we do that, the problem we have is that we spend all the money. So they kill us on trade. I made great trade deals with the European nations because if you add them up, they're about the same size economically. Their economy is about the same size as the United States. And they were no cars, they don't want anything that we have, but we're supposed to take their cars, their food, their everything, their agriculture. I changed that. But the big thing I changed is they don't want to pay. And the only reason that he can play games with NATO is because I got them to put up hundreds of billions of dollars. I said, and he's right about this, I said, no, I'm not going to support NATO if you don't pay. They asked me that question, would you guard us against Russia at a very secret meeting of the 28 states at that time, nations at that time? And I said, no, if you don't pay, I won't do that. And you know what happened? Billions and billions of dollars came flowing in the next day and the next months. But now we're in the same position. We're paying everybody's bills.
Let's turn to the issue of democracy. Former President Trump I want to ask you about January 6, 2021. After you rallied your supporters that day, some of them stormed the Capitol to stop the constitutionally mandated counting of electoral votes. As president, you swore an oath to, quote, preserve, protect, and defend, unquote, the Constitution. What do you say to voters who believe that you violated that oath through your actions and inaction on January 6th and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I don't think too many believe that. And let me tell you about January 6th. On January 6th, we had a great border. Nobody coming through, very few. On January 6th, we were energy independent. On January 6th, we had the lowest taxes ever. We had the lowest regulations ever. On January 6th, we were respected all over the world. All over the world, we were respected. And then he comes in, and we're now laughed at. We're like a bunch of stupid people. What happened to the United States' reputation under this man's leadership is horrible, including weaponization, which I'm sure at some point you'll be talking about, where he goes after his political opponent because he can't beat him fair and square.
You have 80 seconds left. My question was, what do you say to those voters who believe that you violated your constitutional oath through your actions and inaction on January 6, 2021, and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I didn't say that to anybody. I said peacefully and patriotically. And Nancy Pelosi, if you just watched the news from 2 days ago, on tape to her daughter, who's a documentary filmmaker, they say, but she's saying, oh, no, it's my responsibility. I was responsible for this. Because I offered her 10,000 soldiers or National Guard, and she turned them down. And the mayor of, in writing, by the way, the mayor, in writing, turned it down, the mayor of D.C. They turned it down. I offered 10,000 because I could see, I had virtually nothing to do. They asked me to go make a speech. I could see what was happening. Everybody was saying they're going to be there on January 6th. They're going to be there. And I said, you know what? There's a lot of people coming. You could feel it. You could feel it, too, and you could feel it. And I said, they ought to have some National Guard or whatever. And I offered it to her. And she now admits that she turned it down. And it was the same day she was, I don't know, she can't be very happy with her daughter because it made her into a liar. She said, I take full responsibility for January 6th.
President Biden?
Look, he encouraged those folks to go up on Capitol Hill, number one. I sat in the dining room off the Oval Office. He sat there for 3 hours watching, begging, being begged by his vice president and a number of his colleagues on the Republican side as well to do something, to call for a stop, to end it. Instead, they talked about these people being patriots and great patrons of America. In fact, he says he'll now forgive them for what they've done. They've been convicted. He says he wants to commute their sentences and say that no. But he went to every single court in the nation. I don't know how many cases, scores of cases, including the Supreme Court. And they said, no, this guy is responsible for doing what was done. He didn't do a damn thing. And these people should be in jail. And they should be the ones who are being held accountable. And he wants to let them all out. And now he says if he loses again, such a whiner that he is, that it could be a bloodbath.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
What they've done to some people that are so innocent, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. What you have done, how you've destroyed the lives of so many people. When they ripped down Portland, when they ripped down many other cities, you go to Minnesota, Minneapolis, what they've done there with the fires all over the city. If I didn't bring in the National Guard, that city would have been destroyed. When you look at all of they took over big chunks of Seattle. I was all set to bring in the National Guard. They heard that, they saw them coming, and they left immediately. What he said about this whole subject is so off. Peacefully patriotic. One other thing. The Unselect Committee, which is basically two horrible Republicans that are all gone now, out of office, and Democrats, all Democrats, they destroyed and deleted all of the information they found because they found out we were right. We were right. And they deleted and destroyed all of the information. They should go to jail for that. If a Republican did that, they'd go to jail.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, I want to give you a minute.
The only person at this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. And the fact of the matter is, what he's telling you is simply not true. The fact is that there was no effort on his part to stop what was going on up in Capitol Hill. And all those people, every one of those who were convicted, deserves to be convicted. The idea that they didn't kill somebody, just went in and broke down doors, broke the windows, occupied offices, turned over desks, turned them over statues. The idea that those people are patriots? Come on. When I asked him the first two debates we had, the debates we had first time around, I said, will you denounce the Proud Boys? He said, no, I'll tell them to stand by. The idea he's refusing, will you denounce these guys? Will you denounce the people we're talking about now? Will you denounce the people who attacked that Capitol? What are you going to do?
I'm going to give you a minute, President Trump, for a follow-up question I have. After a jury convicted you of 34 felonies last month, you said if reelected, you would, quote, have every right to go after, unquote, your political opponents. You just talked about members of the Select Committee on January 6th going to jail. Your main political opponent is standing on stage with you tonight. Can you clarify exactly what it means about you feeling you have every right to go after your political opponents?
Well, I said my retribution is going to be success. We're going to make this country successful again, because right now it's a failing nation. My retribution is going to be success. But when he talks about a convicted felon, his son is a convicted felon at a very high level. His son is convicted, going to be convicted probably numerous other times. Should have been convicted before, but his Justice Department let the statute of limitations lapse on the most important things. But he could be a convicted felon as soon as he gets out of office. Joe could be a convicted felon with all of the things that he's done. He's done horrible things. All of the death caused at the border, telling the Ukrainian people that we're going to want $1 billion or you change the prosecutor. Otherwise, you're not getting $1 billion. If I ever said that, that's quid pro quo. That we're not going to do anything. We're not going to give you $1 billion unless you change your prosecutor, having to do with the son. This man is a criminal. This man, you're lucky. You're lucky. I did nothing wrong. We'd have a system that was rigged and disgusting. I did nothing wrong.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, you have said, I'm coming right to you, sir. Well, you want to respond? Go ahead. I'll give you a minute to respond.
The idea that I did anything wrong relative to what you're talking about is outrageous. It's simply a lie, number one. Number two, the idea that you have a right to seek retribution against any American just because you're president is wrong. It's simply wrong. No president's ever spoken like that before. No president in our history has spoken like that before. Number three, the crimes that you are still charged with, and think of all the civil penalties you have. How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties for molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things, of having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant? I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
Give you a minute, sir.
I didn't have sex with a porn star, number one. Number two, that was a case that was started and moved. They moved a high-ranking official at DOJ into the Manhattan DA's office to start that case. That case is going to be appealed and won. We had a very terrible judge, a horrible judge, Democrat. The prosecutor were all high-ranking Democrats, appointed people, and both the civil and the criminal. He basically went after his political opponent because he thought it was going to damage me. But when the public found out about these cases, because they understand it better than he does, he has no idea what these cases are. But when they found out about these cases, you know what they did? My poll numbers went up, way up. You know that because you're reporting it. And we took in more money in the last 2 weeks than we've ever taken in the history of any campaign. I don't think any campaign has ever taken. Hundreds of millions of dollars came pouring in because the public knows it's a scam and it's a guy that's after his political opponent because he can't win fair and square.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, you have said, quote, Donald Trump and his MAGA Republicans are determined to destroy American democracy. Do you believe that the tens of millions of Americans who are likely to vote for President Trump will be voting against American democracy?
The more they know about what he's done, yes. The more they know about what he's done. And there's a lot more coming. He's got a lot of cases down the road coming around. He's got a whole range of issues he has to face. I don't know what the juries will do, but I do know he has a real problem. And so the fact that, could you ever think you heard any president say that I'm going to seek retribution? Do you ever hear any president say that I thought Hitler had some good ideas? What got me involved to run in the first place after my son had died, I decided in Iraq, because of Iraq, I said I wasn't going to run again until I saw what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. People coming out of the woods carrying swastikas on torches, and singing the same anti-Semitic bile they sang when back in Germany. And the young woman got killed. I spoke to the mother, and they asked him. They said, "What do you think of those people? The ones who got killed, the one who tried to stop it, and the ones," he said, "I think they're fine people on both sides." What American president would ever say Nazis coming out of fields carrying torches, singing the same anti-Semitic bile, carrying swastikas were fine people? And this is a guy who says Hitler's done some good things. I'd like to know what they are. The good things Hitler's done, that's what he said. This guy has no sense of American democracy.
President Trump.
Jake, both of you know that story has been totally wiped out, because when you see the sentence, it said 100% exoneration on this. So he just keeps it going. He says he ran because of Charlottesville. He didn't run because of Charlottesville. He ran because it was his last chance. He's not equipped to be president. You know it, and I know it. It's ridiculous. We have a debate. We're trying to justify his presidency. His presidency is, without question, the worst president, the worst presidency in the history of our country. We shouldn't be having a debate about it. There's nothing to debate. He made up the Charlottesville story, and you'll see it's debunked all over the place. Every reasonable anchor has debunked it. And just the other day, it came out where it was fully debunked. It's a nonsense story. He knows that, and he didn't run because of Charlottesville. He used that as an excuse to run.
President Biden.
And debunked. It happened. All you have to do is listen to what was said at the time. And the idea that somehow that's the only reason I ran. I ran because I was worried a guy like this guy could get elected. If he thought they were good people coming out of that forest, carrying those woods, carrying those torches, then he didn't deserve to be president. Didn't deserve to be president at all. And the idea that he's talking about all this being fabricated, we saw with our own eyes. We saw what happened on January 6th. We saw the people breaking through the windows. We saw people occupying his own vice president. Look, there's a reason why 40 of his 44 top cabinet officers refused to endorse him this time. His vice president hasn't endorsed him this time. So why? Why? They know him well. They serve with him. Why are they not endorsing him?
Let's talk about persistent challenges you both faced in your first terms, and you'd certainly face again in a second term. President Biden, while black unemployment dropped to a record low under your presidency, black families still earn far less than white families. Black mothers are still 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes, and black Americans are imprisoned at 5 times the rate of white Americans. What do you say to black voters who are disappointed that you haven't made more progress?
They acknowledge they made a lot of progress, number one. The fact of the matter is there's more small black businesses that have been started than any time in history. Number two, the wages of black unemployment is the lowest level it's been in a long, long time. Number three, we're providing housing for black Americans and dealing with the segregation that exists among these corporations that collude to keep people out of their houses. And in addition to that, we find that the impact on the choice that black families have to make relative to child care is incredibly difficult. When we did the first major piece of legislation in the past, I was able to reduce black child care costs. I cut them in half. We got to make sure we provide for child care costs. We got to make sure, because when you provide those child care protections, you increase economic growth because more people can be in the job market. So there's more to be done, considerably more to be done. But we've done a great deal so far, and I'm not letting up, and they know it.
You have 49 seconds left. What do you say to black voters who are disappointed with the progress so far?
I say I don't blame them for being disappointed. Inflation is still hurting them badly. For example, I provided for the idea that any black family first-time home buyer should get a $10,000 tax credit to be able to buy their first home so they can get started. I made sure that we're in a situation where all those black families and those black individuals who had to take out student loans that were ballooning, that if they were engaged in nursing, doctor, and anything having to do with volunteerism, if they paid their bills for 10 years their student debt. All the rest was forgiven after 10 years. Millions have benefited from that. And we're going to do a whole lot more for black families.
Thank you, President Trump.
And he caused the inflation. He's blaming inflation, and he's right, it's been very bad. He caused the inflation, and it's killing black families and Hispanic families and just about everybody. It's killing people. They can't buy groceries anymore. They can't. You look at the cost of food where it's doubled and tripled and quadrupled. They can't live. They're not living anymore. He caused this inflation. I gave him a country with essentially no inflation. It was perfect. It was so good. All he had to do is leave it alone. He destroyed it with his Green New Scam and all this money that's being thrown out the window. He caused inflation. As sure as you're sitting there, the fact is that his big kill on the black people is the millions of people that he's allowed to come in through the border. They're taking black jobs now, and it could be 18, it could be 19, and even 20 million people. They're taking black jobs, and they're taking Hispanic jobs, and you haven't seen it yet, but you're going to see something that's going to be the worst in our history.
Thank you. President Biden?
There was no inflation when I became president. You know why? The economy was flat on its back. 15% unemployment. He decimated the economy, absolutely decimated the economy. That's why there was no inflation at the time. There were no jobs. We provided thousands of millions of jobs for individuals who are in all communities, including minority communities. We made sure that they have health insurance. We have covered, the ACA has increased. I made sure that they're $8,000 per person in a family to get written off for health care. But this guy wants to eliminate that. They tried 50 times. He wants to get rid of the ACA again. And they're going to try again if they win. You find ourselves in a position where the idea that we're not doing anything. We put more police on the street than any administration has. He wants to cut the cops. We're providing for equity and making sure people have a shot to make it. There's a lot going on, but in inflation, he caused it by his tremendous malfeasance in the way he handled the pandemic.
Thank you. Another persistent challenge is the climate crisis. 2023 was the hottest year in recorded history, and communities across the country are confronting the devastating effects of extreme heat, intensifying wildfires, stronger hurricanes, and rising sea levels. Former President Trump, you've vowed to end your opponent's climate initiatives, but will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
Well, let me just go back to what he said about the police, how close the police are to him. Almost every police group in the nation from every state is supporting Donald J. Trump. Almost every police group. And what he's done to the black population is horrible, including the fact that for 10 years he called them super predators. We can't, in the 1990s, we can't forget that. Super predators was his name, and he called it to them for 10, and they've taken great offense at it, and now they see it happening. But when they see what I did for criminal justice reform and for the historically black colleges and universities, where I funded them and got them all funded, and the opportunity zones with Tim, as you know, Tim Scott was incredible. He did a great job, great senator from South Carolina. He came to me with the idea, and it was a great idea. It's one of the most successful economic development acts ever in the country, opportunity zones. And the biggest beneficiary are blacks. And that's why we have the best numbers with them in maybe ever. They're saying ever. I read this morning where ever, the best numbers. He's lost much of the black population because he's done a horrible job for black people. He's also done a horrible job for Hispanics. But wait till you see these millions of people pouring into our country, and they're going to take the jobs, and it's already started, and you haven't seen anything yet. It's a disaster.
You've 38 seconds left. President Trump, will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
So I want absolutely immaculate clean water, and I want absolutely clean air, and we had it. We had H2O. We had the best numbers ever, and we were using all forms of energy, all forms, everything. And yet, during my 4 years, I had the best environmental numbers ever. And my top environmental people gave me that statistic just before I walked on the stage, actually.
I don't know where the hell he's been. The idea that anything he said is true. I've passed the most extensive climate change legislation in history. We find ourselves, and by the way, black colleges, I came up with $15 billion for HBCUs, historic black universities and colleges, because they don't have the kind of contributors that they have to build these laboratories and the like. Any black student is capable in college of doing what any white student can do. They just have the money, but now they'll be able to get those jobs in high tech. We're in a situation where the idea that he is claiming to have done something that had the cleanest water, he hadn't done a damn thing for the environment. He pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. I immediately joined it because if we reach 1.5 degrees Celsius at any one point, there's no way back. The only existential threat to humanity is climate change, and he didn't do a damn thing about it. He wants to undo all that I've done.
The Paris Accord was going to cost us $1 trillion, and China nothing, and Russia nothing, and India nothing. It was a ripoff of the United States. And I ended it because I didn't want to waste that money because they treat us horribly. We were the only ones. It was costing us money. Nobody else was paying into it. And it was a disaster. But everything that he said just now, I'll give you an example. I heard him say before insulin. I'm the one that got the insulin down for the seniors. I took care of the seniors. What he's doing is destroying all of our medical programs because the migrants coming in, they want everybody. And look, I have the biggest heart on the stage, I guarantee you that. And I want to take care of people. But we're destroying our country. They're taking over our schools, our hospitals, and they're going to be taking over Social Security. He is destroying Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
The idea is that we, in fact, we were the only ones of consequence who were not members of the Paris Accord. How can we do anything? We're not able to, the United States can't get its pollution under control. One of the largest polluters in the world, #1. We're making significant progress. By 2035, we will have cut pollution in half. We have made significant progress, and we're continuing to make progress. We set up a climate corps for thousands of young people will learn how to deal with climate, just like the Peace Corps. And we're moving in directions that are going to significantly change the elements of cause of pollution. But the idea that he claims that he has the biggest heart up here and he's really concerned about pollution and about climate, I've not seen any indication of that. And by the way, with regard to prescription drugs, one company agreed that they would reduce the price to $35, which I was calling for, one, voluntarily. I made sure every company in the world, every pharmaceutical company, cannot have to pay.
Thank you.
And by the way,
so every day, millions of Americans struggle just to make ends meet. For many older Americans, Social Security provides a critical lifeline. President Biden, if nothing is done to Social Security, seniors will see their benefits cut in just over 10 years. Will you name tonight one specific step that you're willing to take to keep Social Security solvent?
Yes, make the very wealthy begin to pay their fair share. Right now, everybody making under $170,000 pays 6% of their income, of their paycheck, every single time they get a paycheck from the time of the first one they get when they're 18 years old. The idea that they're going to, I'm proposing that everybody, they pay, the millionaires pay 1%. 1%. So no one I would not raise the cost of Social Security for anybody under $400,000. After that, I began to make the wealthy begin to pay their fair share by increasing from 1% beyond to be able to guarantee the program for life.
So you still have 82 seconds left. Are there any other measures that you think that would be able to help keep Social Security solvent, or is that one enough?
Well, no, that one enough will keep it solvent, but the biggest thing I'll do if we defeat this man, because he wants to get rid of Social Security. He thinks there's plenty to cut in Social Security. He's wanting to cut Social Security and Medicare, both times. And and if you look at the program put forward by the House Republican caucus that I believe supports, is in fact want to cut it as well. The idea that we don't need to protect our seniors is ridiculous. And by the way, the American public has greater health care coverage today than ever before. And on the ACA, as I said, you're in a circumstance where 400,000 people, 40 million people would not have insurance because they have a pre-existing condition. Only thing that allows them to have that insurance is the fact that they, in fact, are part of the ACA. And by the way, the other thing is, we're in a situation where we talk about education for black communities. I've raised the amount of money for Pell Grants by another $8,000. So anybody making under $70,000 a year is going to be able to get $15,000 toward their tuition. He just doesn't know what he's talking about.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump.
So I've dealt with politicians all my life. I've been on this side of the equation for the last 8 years. I've never seen anybody lie like this guy. He lies. I've never seen it. He could look you in the face. About so many other things, too. And we mentioned the laptop. We mentioned Russia, Ukraine. Everything he does is a lie. It's misinformation and disinformation. The losers and suckers story that he made up is a total lie on the military. It's a disgrace. But Social Security, he's destroying it because millions of people are pouring into our country, and they're putting them onto Social Security. They're putting them onto Medicare, Medicaid. They're putting them in our hospitals. They're taking the place of our citizens. What they're doing to the VA, to our veterans, is unbelievable. Our veterans are living in the street, and these people are living in luxury hotels. He doesn't know what he's doing, and it's really coming back. I've never seen such anger in our country before.
President Biden?
The idea that veterans are not being taken care of, I told you before. And by the way, when I said suckers and losers, he acknowledged after that he fired that general. That general got fired because he's the one that acknowledged that that's what he said. He was the one standing with Trump when he said it, number one. Number two, the idea that we're going to be in a situation where all these millions and millions, the way he talks about it, illegal aliens are coming into the country and taking away our jobs. There's a reason why we have the fastest growing economy in the world, the reason why we have the most successful economy in the world. We're doing better than any other nation in the world. And by the way, those 15 Nobel laureates he talked about being phony, those 15 Nobel laureates, economists, they all said that if Trump is reelected, we're likely to have a recession. And inflation is going to increasingly go up. And by the way, worst president in history, 159 presidential scholars voted him the worst president in the history of the United States of America.
President Biden, thank you so much. Let's turn to the cost of child care, which many American families struggle to afford. President Trump, both you and President Biden have tried to address this issue, but the average cost of child care in this country has risen to more than $11,000 a year per child. For many families, the cost of child care for 2 children is more than their rent. In your second term, what would you do to make child care more affordable?
Just to go back, the general got fired because he was no good. And if he said that, that's why he made it up. But we have 19 people that said I didn't say it, and they're very highly respected, much more so than him. The other thing is, he doesn't fire people. He never fired people. I've never seen him fire anybody. I did fire a lot. I fired Comey because he was no good. I fired a lot of the top people at the FBI, drained the swamp. They were no good. Not easy to fire people. You'd pay a price for it, but they were no good. I inherited these people. I didn't put them there. I didn't put Comey there. He was no good. I fired him. This guy hasn't fired anybody. He never fires. He should have fired every military man that was involved with that the Afghanistan horror show, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. He didn't fire. Did you fire anybody? Did you fire anybody that's on the border that's allowed us to have the worst border in the history of the world? Did anybody get fired for allowing 18 million people, many from prisons, many from mental institutions? Did you fire anybody that allowed our country to be destroyed? Joe, our country is being destroyed as you and I sit up here and waste a lot of time on this debate. This shouldn't be a debate. He is the worst president. He just said about me because I said it. But look, he's the worst president in the history of our country. He's destroyed our country. Now, all of a sudden, he's trying to get a little tough on the border. He came out with a nothing deal, and it reduced it a little bit, like this much. It's insignificant. He wants open borders. He wants our country to either be destroyed or he wants to pick up those people as voters. And I don't think we just can't let it happen. If he wins this election, our country doesn't have a chance, not even a chance, of coming out of this rut. We probably won't have a country left anymore. That's how bad it is. He is the worst in history by far.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden?
We're the most admired country in the world. We're the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity. We have the finest military in the history of the world, the finest in the history of the world. No one thinks we're weak. No one wants to screw around with us. Nobody, number one. Number two, the idea that we're talking about worst presidents. I wasn't joking. Look it up or go online. 159 or 58, don't hold me the exact number, presidential historians, they've had meetings and they voted who's the worst president in American history. One through best to worst. They said he was the worst in all of American history. That's a fact. That's not conjecture. He can argue they're wrong, but that's what they voted. The idea that he is doing anything to deal with child care, he did virtually nothing to child care. We should significantly increase the child care tax credit. We should significantly increase the availability of women and men or single parents to be able to go back to work. And we should encourage businesses to have.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, the question was about what would you do to make child care more affordable, if you want to take your minute.
Just so you understand, we have polling, we have other things that they rate him the worst because what he's done is so bad. And they rate me, I'll show you, I will show you. And they rate me one of the best, okay? And if I'm given another 4 years, I will be the best. I think I'll be the best. Nobody's ever created an economy like us. Nobody ever cut taxes like us. He's the only one I know. He wants to raise your taxes by 4 times. He wants to raise everybody's taxes by 4 times. He wants the Trump tax cuts to expire. So everybody, including the two of you, are going to pay 4 to 5 times. Nobody ever heard of this before. All my life, I'd grow up and I'd see politicians talking about cutting taxes. When we cut taxes, as I said, we did more business. Apple and all these companies, they were bringing money back into our country. The worst president in history by far, and everybody knows it.
President Biden?
Look, the fact of the matter is that he's dead wrong about, he's increased the tariff, he will increase the taxes on middle-class people. I said I'd never raise a tax on anybody making less than $400,000. I didn't. But this tariff is 10% tariffs. Everything coming into the country, you know what the economists say? That's going to cost the average American $2,500 a year more because they're going to have to pay the difference in food and all the things that are very important. Number two, he's in a situation where he talks about how he has not raised, he's somehow helped the middle class. The middle class have been devastated by you. Now you want a new tax cut of $5 trillion over the next 10 years, which is going to fundamentally bankrupt the country. You had the largest deficit of any president in American history, number one. Number two, you have not, in fact, made any contact, any progress with China. We are at the lowest trade deficit with China since 2010.
Thank you, President Biden.
You lost
Thank you, President Biden. Let's discuss an epidemic impacting millions of Americans that both of you have made a top priority in your first term, the opioid crisis. And for both of you, the number of overdose deaths in this country has gone up. Under your term, it went up. Under your term, it has gone up. Former President Trump, despite the efforts that both of you have made, more than 100,000 Americans are dying from overdoses every year, primarily from fentanyl and other opioids. What will you do to help Americans right now in the throes of addiction who are struggling to get the treatment they need?
To finish up, we now have the largest deficit in the history of our country under this guy. We have the largest deficit with China. He gets paid by China. He's a Manchurian candidate. He gets money from China. So I think he's afraid to deal with them or something. But do you notice he never took out my tariffs because we bring in so much money with the tariffs that I imposed on China. He never took them away. He can't because it's too much money. It's tremendous. And we saved our steel industries, and there was more to come, but he hasn't done that. But he hasn't cut the tariffs because he can't, because it's too much money. But he's got the largest deficit in the history of our country, and he's got the worst situation with China. China's going to own us if you keep allowing them to do what they're doing to us as a country. They are killing us as a country, Joe, and you can't let that happen. You're destroying our country.
So, President Trump, you have 67 seconds left. The question was, what are you going to do to help Americans in the throes of addiction right now who are struggling to get the treatment they need?
Jake, we were doing very well at addiction until the COVID came along. We had the 2.5, almost 3 years of like nobody's ever had before, any country, in every way. And then we had to get tough, and it was the drugs pouring across the border were it started to increase. We got great equipment. We bought the certain dog that's the most incredible thing that you've ever seen, the way they can spot it. We did a lot, and we were getting very low numbers, very, very low numbers. Then he came along. The numbers, have you seen the numbers now? It's not only the 18 million people that I believe is even low, because the gotaways, they don't even talk about gotaways. But the numbers of the amount of drugs and human trafficking in women coming across our border, the worst thing I've ever seen, at numbers that nobody's ever seen under him because the border's so bad. But the number of drugs coming across our border now is the largest we've ever had by far.
President Trump, thank you. President Biden?
Fentanyl and the byproducts of fentanyl went down for a while. And I wanted to make sure we use the machinery that can detect fentanyl, these big machines that roll over everything that comes across the border. And it costs a lot of money. That was part of this deal we put together, this bipartisan deal. More fentanyl machines, more be able to detect drugs, more numbers of agents, more numbers of all the people at the border. And when we had that deal done, he called his Republican colleagues, said, don't do it. It's going to hurt me politically. No, he never argued it's not a good bill. It's a really good bill. We need those machines. We need those machines. And we're coming down very hard in every country in Asia in terms of precursors for fentanyl. And Mexico is working with us to make sure they don't have the technology to be able to put it together. That's what we have to do. We need those machines.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, and again, the question is about Americans in the throes of addiction right now, struggling to get the treatment they need.
Well, because this does pertain to it. He ended Remain in Mexico. He ended catch and release. I made it catch and release in Mexico, not catch and release here. We had so many things that we had done, hard negotiations with Mexico, and I got it all for nothing. It's just like when you have a hostage. We always pay $6 billion for a hostage. Every time we say there's a hostage. Now we have a hostage, a Wall Street Journal reporter, I think a good guy, and he's over there because Putin is laughing at this guy, probably asking for billions of dollars for the reporter. I will have him out very quickly as soon as I take office. Before I take office, I said by literally as soon as I win the election, I will have that reporter out. He should have had him out a long time ago, but Putin's probably asking for billions and billions of dollars because this guy pays it every time. We had 2 cases where we paid $6 billion for 5 people. I got 58 people out, and I paid essentially nothing.
Thank you, President Trump. Dana?
Let's turn to concerns that voters have about each of you. President Biden, you would be 86 at the end of your 2nd term. How do you address concerns about your capability to handle the toughest job in the world well into your 80s?
Well, first of all, I spent half my career being criticized being the youngest person in politics. I was the 2nd youngest person ever elected to the United States Senate, and now I'm the oldest. This guy's 3 years younger and a lot less competent. I think that just look at the record. Look at what I've done. Look how I've turned around the horrible situation he left me. As I said, 15 million new jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, more investment in America, over billions of dollars in private investment in enterprises that we are growing. By the way, we brought an awful lot of people. Well, the whole idea of computer chips, we used to have 40% of the market. We invented those chips, and we lost it because he was sending people to find the cheapest jobs overseas and to bring home a product. So I went to South Korea. I convinced Samsung to invest billions of dollars here in the United States. And guess what? Those fabs, they call to build these chips, those fabs pay over $100,000. You don't need a college degree for them. And there's billions, about $40 billion already being invested and being built right now in the United States, creating significant jobs for Americans from all over the world.
President Biden, you have 40 seconds left. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would. The idea that somehow we are this failing country. I never heard a president talk like this before. We're the envy of the world. Name me a single major country president who wouldn't trade places with the United States of America for all our problems and all our opportunities. We're the most progressive country in the world in getting things done. We're the strongest country in the world. We're a country in the world who keeps our word, and everybody trusts us, all of our allies, and our those who he cuddles up to, from Kim Jong-un, who he sends love letters to, and Putin, etc., they don't want to screw around with us.
Thank you. Former President Trump, to follow up, you would be 82 at the end of your second term. What do you say to voters who have concerns about your capabilities to serve?
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them, both of them, as you know. We made it public. He took none. I'd like to see him take one, just one, a real easy one. Like go through the first 5 questions. He couldn't do it. But I took 2 cognitive tests. I took physical exams every year. And, you know, we knock on wood wherever we may have wood, that I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way, and I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. I think I'm in very good shape. I feel that I'm as in good a shape as I was 25, 30 years ago. Actually, I'm probably a little bit lighter, but I'm in as good a shape as I was years ago. I feel very good. I feel the same. But I was willing to take a cognitive test. And you know what? If I didn't do well, I aced them. Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who's a great guy when he was White House doctor. And then I took another one, a similar one. And one of them said they've never seen anybody ace him.
Thank you. President Biden?
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds.
You never said it was 6'4".
Well, you said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, that's what you're. Anyway, just take a look at what he says he is, and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. The reason I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie that he's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
Never.
But I have, you know how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Okay, let's
not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to turn
Let's not act like children.
to a specific concern that voters have about you. Will you pledge tonight that once all legal challenges have been exhausted, that you will accept the results of this election, regardless of who wins, and you will say right now that political violence in any form is unacceptable?
Well, I shouldn't have to say that, but of course I believe that. It's totally unacceptable. And if you would see my statements that I made on Twitter at the time, and also my statement that I made in the Rose Garden, you would say it's one of the strongest statements you've ever seen. In addition to the speech I made in front of, I believe, the largest crowd I've ever spoken to, and I will tell you, nobody ever talks about that. They talk about a relatively small number of people that went to the Capitol, and in many cases were ushered in by the police. And as Nancy Pelosi said, it was her responsibility, not mine. She said that loud and clear. But the answer is, if the election is fair, free, and I want that more than anybody. And I'll tell you something. I wish he was a great president, because I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be at one of my many places enjoying myself. I wouldn't be under indictment because I wouldn't have been his political opponent, because he indicted me because I was his opponent. I wish he was a great president. I would rather have that. I wouldn't be here. I don't mind being here. But the only reason I'm here is he's so bad as a president that I'm going to make America great again. We're going to make America great again. We're a failing nation right now. We're a seriously failing nation. And we're a failing nation because of him. His policies are so bad. His military policies are insane. They're insane. These are wars that will never end with him. He will drive us into World War III, and we're closer to World War III than anybody can imagine. We are very, very close to World War III, and he's driving us there. And Kim Jong-un and President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, all of these, Putin, they don't respect him. They don't fear him. They have nothing going with this gentleman, and he's going to drive us into World War III.
You want a World War III, let him follow and win, and let Putin say, do what you want, NATO. Just do what you want. There's a thing called Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all, and required response. The idea, I can't think of a single major leader in the world who wouldn't trade places with the job I've done and what they've done. Because we are a powerful nation. We have wonderful people. It's because of the people, not me. It's because of the American people. They're capable of anything, and they step up when they're needed. And right now, we're needed. We're needed to protect the world because our own safety is at stake. And again, you want to have a war, just let Putin go ahead and take Kyiv, make sure they move on, see what happens in Poland, Hungary, and other places along that border. Then you have a war.
President Trump, as I come back to you for a follow-up, the question was, will you accept the results of this election, regardless of who wins?
Just to finish what he said, if I might, Russia, they took a lot of land from Bush. They took a lot of land from Obama and Biden. They took no land, nothing from Trump, nothing. He knew not to do it. He's not going to play games with me. He knew that. I got along with him very well, but he knew not to play games. He took nothing from me. But now he's going to take the whole thing from this man right here. That's a war that should have never started. It would have never started ever with me. And he's going to take Ukraine. And, you know, you asked me a question before, would you do this? He's got us in such a bad position right now with Ukraine and Russia, because Ukraine's not winning that war. He said, I will never settle until such time. They're running out of people. They're running out of soldiers. They've lost so many people. It's so sad. They've lost so many people, and they've lost those gorgeous cities with the golden domes that are 1,000 years old, all because of him and stupid decisions. Russia would have never attacked if I were president.
President Trump, the question was, will you accept the results of the election, regardless of who wins? Yes or no, please.
If it's a fair and legal and good election, absolutely. I would have much rather accepted these, but the fraud and everything else was ridiculous. And if you want, we'll have a news conference on it in a week, or we'll have another one of these in a week. But I will absolutely, there's nothing I'd rather do. It would be much easier for me to do that than I'm running again. I wasn't really going to run until I saw the horrible job he did. He's destroying our country. I would be very happy to be someplace else, in a nice location someplace. And again, no indictments, no political opponent stuff, because it's the only way he thinks he can win. But unfortunately, it's driven up my numbers and driven them up to a very high level because the people understand it.
Well, let's see what your numbers are when this election is over. Let's see. You're a whiner. When you lost the first time, you continued, you appealed and appealed to courts all across the country. Not one single court in America said any of your claims had any merit, state or local, none. But you continue to provoke this lie about somehow there's all this misrepresentation, all this stealing. There is no evidence of that at all. And I tell you what, I doubt whether you'll accept it because you're such a whiner. The idea, if you lose again, you accepting anything, you can't stand the loss. Something snapped in you when you lost the last time.
It is now time for the candidates to deliver their closing statements as predetermined by a coin toss. We're going to begin with you, President Biden. You have 2 minutes.
We've made significant progress from the debacle that was left by President Trump in his last term. We find ourselves in a situation where, number one, we have to make sure that we have a fair tax system. I ask anyone out there in the audience or anyone out watching this debate, do you think the tax system is fair? The fact is that I said nobody even making under $400,000 had a single penny increase in their taxes and will not. And if I'm reelected, that'll be the case again. But this guy has increased your taxes because of the deficit, number one. He's increased inflation because of the debacle he left after the way he handled the pandemic. And he finds himself in a position where he now wants to tax you more by putting a 10% tariff on everything that comes into the United States of America. What I did, when, for example, he wants to get rid of the ability of Medicare for us to be able to negotiate drug prices with the big pharma companies. Well, guess what? We got it down to $35 for insulin instead of $400. No more than $2,000 for every senior, no matter how much prescription they need. You know what that did? That reduced the federal debt by $160 billion over 10 years because the government doesn't have to pay the exorbitant prices. I'm going to make that available to every senior all along. It's happening now, and everybody in America. He wants to get rid of that. I'm going to make sure that we have child care. We're going to significantly increase the credit people have for child care. I'm going to make sure we do something about what we're doing on lead pipes and all the things that are causing health problems for people across the country. We're going to continue to fight to bring down inflation and give people a break.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, you now have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Like so many politicians, this man is just a complainer. He said, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to get rid of this tax, that tax. But he doesn't do anything. All he does is make our country unsafe by allowing millions and millions of people to pour in. Our military doesn't respect him. We look like fools in Afghanistan. We didn't stop Israel. It was such a horrible thing that would have never happened. It should have never happened. Iran was broke. Anybody that did business with Iran, including China, they couldn't do business with the United States. They all passed. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah, for terror, no money whatsoever. Again, Ukraine should have never happened. He talks about all this stuff, but he didn't do it. For 3.5 years, we're living in hell. We have the Palestinians and we have everybody else rioting all over the place. You talk about Charlottesville. This is 100 times Charlottesville, 1,000 times. The whole country is exploding because of you, because they don't respect you, and they have to respect their president, and they don't respect you throughout the world. What we did was incredible. We rebuilt the military. We got the largest tax cut in history, the largest regulation cut in history. The reason he's got jobs is because I cut the regulations that gave jobs, but he's putting a lot of those regulations back on. All of the things that we've done, nobody's never seen anything like, even from a medical standpoint, right to try, where we can try space-age materials instead of going to Asia or going to Europe and trying to get when you're terminally ill. Now you can go and you can get something. You sign a document. They've been trying to get it for 42 years. But you know what we did for the military was incredible. Choice for our soldiers, where our soldiers, instead of waiting for 3 months to see a doctor, can go out and get themselves fixed up and readied up and take care of themselves, and they're living. And that's why I had the highest approval rating in the history of the VA. So all of these things, we're in a failing nation, but it's not going to be failing anymore. We're going to make it great again.
Thank you, former President Trump, President Biden.